Good evening, everyone. I'd like to call this meeting of the Sterling Heights City Council to order. Please stand with me for the Pledge of Allegiance. Remain standing for the invocation. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Dear God, please bless our elected officials. Grant them courage and wisdom to do what is right for all citizens.
Amen.
Thank you, Ms. Riska. Can we please have the roll call?
Mayor Taylor?
Here.
Mrs. Sarowski?
Here.
Mrs. Kosky?
Present.
Mr. Radke?
Present.
Mrs. Schmidt?
Present.
Mr. Yanis?
Here.
Present.
Thank you, Council. We need approval of the agenda.
Mr. Mayor,
Mrs. Kosky.
move to approve the agenda.
Support.
Been moved and supported. Any discussion?
Mr. Mayor,
Mr. Radke.
if I could, I'd like to remove item 9H from the consent agenda and make it consideration item 10C.
You can, so we will take consent agenda item 9H. We'll make a consideration item 10C. Is there anything else, council? No further discussion. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. First item on our agenda tonight is a report from our city manager, Mark Vanderpool. Mr. Vanderpool.
Thank you, Mayor. Let me begin by reminding everyone that our offices will be closed on Labor Day, which is Monday, September the 5th. That includes all of our offices, obviously with the exception of police and fire. Refuse collection will be delayed one day, so if you have a Monday collection, that'll be on Tuesday and so on throughout the week, and Fridays will be on Saturday. So please be mindful of that closure. And speaking of closures, I hate to inform the community, but we do have to close Dodge Park Road. This is between 15 Mile and the Sterling Relief Drain. And this is due to a water main break that we experienced a few weeks ago in the area. Fortunately, we were able to isolate the break, close off some valves, and no homes lost water during the break, which is great news. The bad news is that we now have all the parts in hand and our contractors ready to go, and we're going to start the work on Friday. So Dodge Park Road in the area that's on the screen before you. So this would be from Brome to Warsaw, so just south of the Sterling Relief Drain down to Warsaw. The entire road will be closed from Friday morning until Sunday morning. So certainly an inconvenience for some traveling the area, but obviously there are some ways around this closure. So we will have signage posted at Metro Parkway and 15 Mile Road to notify all motorists that the roadway will be closed to through traffic. So we apologize in advance to the 6 homes that are going to be without power. We've notified each of the 6 homeowners and left door tags in cases where we couldn't, they weren't home. So there has been notification, and they will be without water for, we hope, no longer than 8 hours. So that will occur on Friday, and then our contractor will be in on Saturday doing all the road work restoration. So it's a significant water main break. However, we were able to isolate it, and the repairs will be done in short order. And I wanted to also highlight on a piece of really good news. The city received an award for the 19 Mile Road repaving project from a couple of years ago. You may recall this was from Clinton River Road to Shaner. It was a major road project. Completely resurfaced, new landscaping, new drive approaches, new parking areas out by the roadway, a lot of landscaping, the traffic signals were all upgraded and so on. So the Asphalt Paving Association of Michigan and MDOT recognized this project as an outstanding best project in our population category. And I just wanted to provide a shout out, special thanks to Mike McCaskill for his exceptional field work with the project. He worked really hard on this from the very beginning, planning stages to the end. long hours communicating, working with residents, solving problems that popped up. And also Jing Lin, who did a very nice job as a project liaison, working with all the residents out there. As you can well imagine, with all these road projects, there's significant coordination with the residents in terms of making sure that they have access to not only their homes, but mail delivery and so on. So really pleased to share that good news. And I'm super excited about the next item, which will close out my report this evening. As the city council well knows, the mayor and council approved the city's first ever social worker last year, and we now have that individual on board, Amy Compton, and she is doing a phenomenal job. We need about 4 or 5 more Amy's, but we'll talk about that later. And I'm pleased to introduce the police chief, Dale Wojciechowski, who's going to now talk about the program.
Of council. It is a pleasure to be here tonight. We started talking about this last year during the budget cycle. Remember, we said, we brought up the idea of bringing on a full-time social worker, and most cities do not have a social worker. In fact, it is extremely unusual that you have a city social worker, and I give a lot of credit to council for taking the bold step to fund it, to find the person, the right person, and it has paid huge dividends for us. In fact, when we had tried to get this position together, there was no one to talk to about what does a city social worker do. There's only a couple in the state. It was that rare of a service. So when we started, we kind of started from scratch, and we remember interviewing Amy, and we said, we don't really even know what this job looks like yet. She was all in, and that was last November. Amy's been here for 9 months, but 2 months she's had an ankle surgery, so she's only been here for 7 months. She's handled 151 citizen contacts and 151 people on her docket or care list, which means 21 referrals a month. That's more than 1 a day. So the need is absolutely there. And again, she provides crisis intervention, conflict resolution, case management, community outreach. Amy's working closely with the police officers, firefighters, city departments to assist in non-crime related situation, including but not limited to family and neighbor disputes, mental health, substance use, home and health care, housing related issues, and hoarding issues. I want to refer back to a couple things that Amy's been doing from a city's perspective, the fire department, the police department, to show that she really truly works with all branches of the city. And a lot of cases, and a lot of members on council will know some of these cases because they get referred to you as a council person. When people don't know where to turn, they reach out to council people need those resources, and Amy becomes the resources for housing, Medicare, and funding so these people can live. We had a blind resident reached out to city requesting help and found himself living alone for the first time in 62 years and was in need of resources. Amy assisted with navigation of APS investigation, advocated for community members' right to continue to live independently with services in place. Services and resources were put in place, obtained were Medicaid, food assistance, a caregiver, in-home chore services, food program, and medical program applied for and put in place, and emergency cash assistance. We also had another city referral, double amputee. Amy coordinated referrals, assessments, and acceptance into the PACE program for nursing level of care in and out of home services. Application acceptance of emergency ARPA funds of $2,000 towards a ramp that was constructed by a contractor who donated $2,000 worth of labor, and $1,000 worth of lumber donated by a lumber yard. The ramp was completed, and the application for grass and snow removal for the 22 and 23 season was also completed. We also had an elderly woman living alone with mental illness. The home was discovered to be a level 5 hoarding situation. The home was declared uninhabitable, and the homeowner locked out of the home. We connected with Meals on Wheels. We got emergency funds for this person, navigated the Adult Protective Service route with an investigation and cleanup of the home, utilized community outreach programming for emergency shelter, food, and clothing. With the fire department, Amy has assisted with an elderly couple, both with Parkinson's, confined to wheelchairs and walkers, unable to do stairs. The fire department had to do 20 different lift assists in the last 3 months. The social worker, Amy, made several home visits, assessing the couple's needs and trying to accommodate their wishes to remain living independently in the home for as long as they can. Application for emergency funds was made, qualified for the following services: Meals on Wheels, handy helpers, spring and fall cleanup, window washing, inside home heavy-duty cleaning, lawn service, and snow removal for the 2022-23 season. Applied for My Choice Waiver Program for nursing home level care, assessment and acceptance into the program, application for supplemental Medicaid completed, referral program to housing specialists who navigate senior living options like selling the home and moving to independent living. That case is currently ongoing. The fire department also had an elderly woman living alone with no relatives. It was a level 3 hoarding situation at the house. Repeated calls to the fire department for lift assist, no family members or friends. Did not qualify for many programs due to monthly income received. Application for emergency funds of $2,000 was received. Navigated APS investigation, home prevention program, safety bars, etc., ramp, installation, mobility, Meals on Wheels, and connected with a caregiver for in-home cleaning, decluttering, personal care, and shopping. The home has been cleaned and decluttered to a level 1 on the hoarding scale, and the caregiver is still in place. As far as the police department goes, repeated calls from residents for assistance from address. Single mom navigating a troubled teen son, charged with domestic assault on her, expulsion from school. This happened at Stevenson High School, and there's many, many calls, police calls, school calls. Amy got involved with the family. We were out there constantly. Amy got involved, and once Amy got involved, the calls turned into zero. Working with the family, getting this kid into, getting him the treatment and care they needed, referrals to the Chaldean Community Foundation, and there, once the PD, we've barely been called in the last 3 months since Amy's been involved. So again, we really, really rely on her in these cases. We also had a suicidal single woman in need of mental health resources, job resources, applying for benefits. Our QR team, that's our opiate quick response team, made contact with her at the home. We referred her to Amy. Amy made contact, scheduled home visits about her current situation, completed a needs assessment, the suicide safety plan. The woman advised that she felt she didn't have much to live for. Update, the woman is now working full-time, benefits in place, and attending mental health therapy. Hoarding homes, which is a big thing. Council, I know you're updated on these. We have our Safe Home Task Force, which we are really involved with heavily, trying to get these people's homes cleaned up, get them back to living independently. Amy is very much involved with the Safe Home Task Force, and involved with the cleanup and helping residents that need this support. And there's currently 5 active homes on that case list that she's dealing with, and she's dealt with 6 in total. Amy, since November, has become a member of our Safe Home Task Force. She's a member of the Sterling Heights Fire Department Peer Support Team. She's a member of the Macomb County Sexual Assault Response Team. She's a member of Macomb County Continuum of Care Committee for the Homeless, and she's a member of the Social Workers for Law Enforcement Network nationwide. Amy, since November, has provided the DPW with mental health resources and 2 mental health trainings to leadership and employees there. She's completed critical incident stress debriefing certification that can be utilized by the fire department and police department. She's completed active shooter training with the police department at the Department of Public Works, and she's coordinated 2 hours of behavioral training for parks and recreation. And Amy currently is facilitating an 8-week grief group at the Senior Center. For anyone that lost a spouse or family member, Amy organized an 8-week-long grief session. She's in week 5 of those meetings, which go every single week. What day of the week is this, Amy? Thursdays. So they're from 2:30 to 4:30, and the second session will begin in mid-September. So to say Amy is busy is an understatement. I appreciate all that she's done for the police department in the city. We couldn't be any happier with her progress. I know she has something that she'd like to read as well, so I'll turn over the mic to Amy.
I just want to say I'm really grateful for this opportunity to be the city's first social worker. The experience has allowed me to assist community members of Sterling Heights with the city departments, which is positive effects for the whole community. It's been discovered in a very short time that there are several people in the community that need or want help and are unsure of where to turn or who to ask. Without advertising that there is a city social worker, I have more than enough people to offer assistance and several waiting patiently. In the time that I have been in this position, several areas of need have been addressed, and that was through the referrals of the fire department, police department, and city departments. Certain areas have proven to require me to focus a lot of my time, and this unfortunately is at the expense of others. The high referral rate and demands on my time indicates that there is definitely a need within the community for a social worker, and I'm glad to be a part of this new initiative with the city of Sterling Heights.
Mayor, I just wanted to conclude by thanking Amy. I've had the privilege of working with her. She does an amazing job in working with all of our various city disciplines, which, as the chief mentioned, is quite extensive. I also wanted to recognize Sergeant Aaron Susala, who's worked very closely with Amy, helping to get her connected with all the city organizational resources that are available in other agencies and so on. We appreciate Sergeant Susala's good work as well. So you can see this is a model undoubtedly for communities across the state. And I was not really joking when I said that we could use 4 or 5 Amy. So we'll be talking much more about community wealth building and how we can continue to provide services to those that need them most in our community. Thank you, Mayor.
All right, thank you very much, Mr. Vanderpool. Thank you, Ms. Compton. Thank you, Chief. Aaron, very good job. You just kept going on and on and on about the list of things going on, and it's very impressive to know that we have that need covered right now, and proud to be a leader in Macomb County and around the state of Michigan, and making sure that these services are provided for the residents who really need them the most. So thank you very much. All right, with that, we'll move on to the next item on our agenda tonight, which is a public hearing, and this is to consider the application by AG Simpson USA Incorporated for an industrial facilities tax exemption certificate at 6700 18.5 Mile Road. We do have a presentation from our Senior Economic Development Advisor and cover boy from Cranes, Detroit. You got the front page, above the fold, nice headshot, and some great comments about all the good work that's going on in the city of Sterling Heights around and along M59. Luke Bonner, Mr. Bonner.
Thank you, Mayor. That is incredibly embarrassing.
It could it possibly be more embarrassing
No,
than what I've got going on right here? I don't know.
Yeah, you've got a teenage acne on your forehead, so.
Yes. All right, Mr. Bonner. When's his contract up again?
Well, thank you, Mayor. Thank you for the embarrassing comments. City Manager, good evening, members of council. Tonight we have another project from AGS Automotive. This is a significant expansion to their 6,700 18.5 Mile Road facility of approximately 277,000 square feet. The total proposed investment is $25 million with 15 new jobs being created. So under our IFEC guidelines, the $25 million investment qualifies for 10 years. The additional 15 jobs qualifies for 2 years, which would be a maximum of 12 years under our program. The total economic impact to the community based on the investment and job creation is anticipated to be another $2.7 million, and that is based off a economic multiplier of 4, which is typically added to manufacturing jobs and their impact. The total projected taxes over that 12-year period of time is $4.1 million, with $1.2 million of taxes being generated to the city and $1.9 million of taxes generated for the school district. As I mentioned, AGS has continued to invest in the community, and especially this plant when they acquired it in 2013. 360,000 square foot vacant facility. It's been vacant for a number of years. They made the investment. They created 90 jobs off the bat. They've continued to invest in that plant. Just last year, they announced another 100 new jobs to the community. AGS has been very intentional as the city has grown and changed in terms of the diversity of our population. They've also been very intentional of hiring multilingual employees at their facilities. They really are best in class in terms of how they manage them as well. Multilingual signage throughout the facility, interpreters on the floor, and I think that's worked out extremely well for them, to the standpoint that we have actually referred other companies to talk to AGS and kind of learn from what they do, as everybody's in a talent pinch, and they've been really good at meeting with and talking to other companies in the community. We've worked with AGS to promote job openings on our website. We've helped them with social media videos for hiring, and they're also an anchor tenant to Velocity. With the majority of their U.S. operations based at the Velocity Center, they've been a great anchor tenant and a great partner. I'd like to introduce Jeff Zulia, who's the U.S. Director of Operations for AGS, so he can talk more about what this investment actually is going to do for the company and what the future holds at that location. Jeff?
Okay, thank you for having me, and hard to follow Amy and Luke. I'm not the best speaker, but, I did want to take a moment to address, Mayor Taylor and the city council. 10 years ago, we sort of started our journey in the city of Sterling Heights, and we had 52 people then. In the last 10 years, we've grown to over 600 now, and we think in the next year and a half we'll be 700. So we started as a small company, and we've grown into a medium-sized company that's getting bigger, that I think we're still trying to fit our britches in. But one of the comments that I want to make is that the support that we've received from the city, from the county, and from the state has been instrumental. And without that support, we never could have done these things. And some other just quick comments is that, it just all reinforce for you that, why have we chose the city of Sterling Heights? It's just, it's right here in the middle of, automotive and the OEMs. So we're right here next to our customers, and it's so important to us. And I can't say enough about the business-friendly, environment, from the council's support to the building official. I mean, the whole city infrastructure, the fire marshal. I mean, we've interacted with everybody over these years, and that support means everything to us because there were so many things we didn't even know that they've educated us on over the years. And of course, it's just a great community to be a part of. And what this will mean, what this means to us is this gives us the ability locally to start our growth and investment for EVs and automotive. Right now we're getting our toe into EVs and autonomous vehicles, and this is really that big step for us that everybody is supporting us with, which means a lot to us and our securing our future. And, and I guess I touched on this already, but, why is the tax abatement important to us? It's automotive, and I can tell you especially at the tier 1 level is very, it's very competitive. We work hard every day just to, stay viable and have an ongoing business concern. And, and I touched on it, how we've grown, but for a company of our size, it takes all of our resources in combination with this support to make this happen. And I just want to thank everybody that's been a part of helping us become who and what we are today. That's it.
Okay, thank you very much, sir. We appreciate it, and thank you for that explanation. Appreciate you being here in Sterling Heights and staying committed to Sterling Heights. At this time, I will open up the public hearing. Is there anyone in the audience who'd like to speak on this item? If not, I'll close the public hearing. Council, we need a motion.
Mr. Mayor,
Mr. Yanez.
resolved to adopt a resolution approving the application by A.G. Simpson USA Incorporated for an industrial facilities tax exemption certificate at 6700 18.5 Mile Road, parcel number 50-10-10-09-300-039 for a period of 12 years in accordance with the guidelines established by City Council, and the mayor and the city clerk are hereby authorized to sign as applicable all documents required in conjunction with this approval.
Support.
It's been moved and supported. Any discussion, Mr. Yanez?
Yeah, I think this is incredibly important. If we learned anything from the pandemic, it's the importance of having jobs here locally. We know that supply chains have become a problem in supplying our manufacturers, and to have this good company who's been a great corporate citizen, who's been expanding here and helping them expand, I think is a great idea. One of the things that we don't really talk about enough is the investment of, when we invest in these companies and they grow, the people who work in these facilities spend their money here. They shop at the local grocery store, they get gas at the local gas station, they eat at the local diner. And so expanding these businesses and hiring more people is incredibly important to our city I think this is a good move on our part. Thank you, A.G. Simpson, for everything that you've done in our city, and so I fully support this. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Yanis. Council, anyone else? Again, thank you, sir, for being here. Luke, thank you for your presentation. We appreciate that. This is exactly the kind of development that we want in Sterling Heights. You know, we're looking for all different kinds of, you know, a diverse set of developments. But the great thing about industrial developments like this, as you said, it supports automotive. It's innovative, working on technologies that are going to be on the cutting edge with autonomous vehicles, with electric vehicles. And you're supporting the automotive suppliers. The automotive suppliers, or you're supporting the automotive companies. The automotive companies we know are the lifeblood here, but it's really, it's companies like A.G. Simpson that help make this a vibrant community, paying a lot in taxes, employing people, expanding, giving more opportunity, helping the housing market, helping every commercial aspect of our city, as Mr. Yanis said. So we appreciate that, and thank you. So council, with no further discussion, all in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Congrats. Thank you. Next item on our agenda is an ordinance introduction, and this is to consider introduction of an ordinance amending Chapter 29 of the City Code of Ordinances to create a business licensing fee exemption for charitable organizations. We have a presentation from our Assistant City Attorney, Don Denault. Mr. Denault.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor, members of council. Good evening. I am here to offer a very short presentation to you on a proposed ordinance amendment relating to our business licensing ordinance. As you all recall, we initiated a very comprehensive business licensing ordinance a little while ago and implemented that through the city clerk's excellent work. It was brought to administration's attention that perhaps it would be in the best interest of the city to waive the business license fee that was established for charitable organizations in order to attract them to Sterling Heights, to encourage their good work for the city and its residents, and certainly just as a public policy matter to allow for that, that additional revenue stream for those businesses to be able to use that for their charitable purposes rather than pay it into a city licensing fee. So with that, there's an ordinance amendment in front of you that will allow for that. We tried to look for some models. It's a little bit unique, but we did find some in other states and other communities in other states that have done this. So it's not unprecedented. And we used a combination of some of the different definitions that we were able to find throughout the country. And I learned a new word. If you noticed it in the definitions, eleemosynary. Yeah. I learned a new
Who are
word.
you trying to impress?
You know?
Exactly.
I always have to have something interesting when I come see you, so that's your word of the day. It does mean charitable or related to charitable purposes, but I actually had to look it up, and I enjoyed it enough to include it. So with that, I'm here for any questions you may have.
Thank you very much, Mr. Denault, and for keeping alive the saying that nobody can understand what a lawyer is saying, speaking legalese. For 20 years, we've been saying, no, we're trying to be plain English, and then you come up with the eleemosynary. All right, is there anyone in the audience who'd like to speak on this item? If not, council, we need a motion.
Mayor Taylor,
Mrs. Sarowski.
resolved to introduce the ordinance amending Chapter 29 of the City Code of Ordinances to create a business licensing fee exemption for charitable organizations.
Support. It's been moved and supported. Any discussion? Mrs. Sarowski.
Not too much, just to say thank you for bringing this to our attention, Mr. Denault. I do not think that we need to really berate this. It looks like it makes perfect sense. I don't see why charitable organizations should have to pay a fee. And that's all I have. Thank you.
Okay, council, anyone else?
Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Yanis.
So when I brought this up at strategic planning last winter, I had been approached by our local Veterans of Foreign Wars organization about this. As you can imagine, during COVID, I think a lot of charities found donations decrease significantly. As they say, you should never assume anything. I assume that they're a 501c3. They are not. They're a 501c19, which I have no idea what a C19 is. But the fact of the matter is, we have this very small organization that a lot of our veterans here locally rely upon in a very tenuous financial situation. And I'd like to, through the chair, to our city attorney, without objection, before this gets brought back, ask the city attorney to see if we can somehow amend the language of this ordinance to fit in other organizations that are not 501c3s, but are charitable organizations.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Yanez. Steve Beelen had reached out to me and said the same thing. So by my reading, this is, and Mr. Koszubski or Mr. Denault, if you, either one of you want to weigh in. So we exempt charitable organizations, and then we define charitable organizations as any corporation or organization which conducts business wholly for charitable, eleemosynary, or philanthropic purposes from which profit is not derived directly or indirectly by any person. So, I mean, I think the Veterans Organization fits so far. And which is exempt from paying federal income tax. I think they're still within this definition. Or recognized by the Federal Internal Revenue Service as a 501c3 by virtue of its charitable endeavors. So to me, it's an or, not an and.
Right.
So, I mean, I think that
Let's
they
ask the lawyer.
qualify based on what we have already. And then it talks about how the applicant has to provide the, proof that they actually qualify. But, I don't think they're going to get caught up in bureaucratic red tape here, but you never know. Mr. Denault, do you want to handle that? I mean, let me, I guess, lead by example and just be plain. Will the Veterans Organization be exempt under this ordinance as it's currently written?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, as it's currently written, if they qualify under federal tax laws for that status, for that tax exempt status, then as currently written, that would be prima facie evidence that they are eligible for our waiver of the fee.
Okay, so there are, just because they're not a 501c3, there's a bunch of different 501 acronym organizations that are exempt from taxes, any one of them. We use 501c3, but not as a limitation, just as an example. Got it.
Good enough for me?
Satisfied?
Okay.
All right.
Good enough for me.
Thank you, Mr. Yanez. Mr. Radke.
Just briefly, I am glad that we're going to be exempting charitable businesses in Sterling Heights. I hate this ordinance. I think we should exempt all businesses from it. I think that it's a money grab on behalf of the city. The fact that charities have come to us saying this costs them money shows the problem with this ordinance. Charities scream first, but I've talked to a lot of business owners who dislike this ordinance. We should repeal this entire ordinance. So I will vote in favor of exempting businesses, but this entire ordinance should be exempted, because just because you run a charity, every business in the city gets hit with this fee. And I think that we're treating some things better than other things. That's all I have, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Radke. Anyone else, council? No further discussion. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Next up is another consideration. This is to consider introduction of an ordinance amending Article 3 of Chapter 51 of the City Code to update the process for obtaining a tree removal permit and the standards for tree replacement. We do have a presentation from our city planner, Chris McLeod. Mr. McLeod.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, City Council, Manager Vanderpool. Unfortunately, I don't have a word of the day, so you'll just have to take the normal presentation that I do here. But so basically, just a quick synopsis of where we're at with this and what's before you tonight. Last fall, City Council requested an amendment to Article 3, Chapter 51, which are basically our tree preservation ordinance, that dealt with how landmark trees are preserved on particularly a developed site, if you will. Our ordinance did a very good job that was amended in 2021 of dealing with sites that were undeveloped. However, in the instance where a singular tree or maybe a handful of trees were removed from a developed site, we felt that there probably could have been a better job in terms of how the ordinance dealt with that. So council led us down that journey, and we've obviously accomplished that. But during that review process, there was a landmark case that came out of Canton that kind of set the whole world on its ear, at least the tree world on its ear, in terms of how trees are regulated and our ability to regulate how they are preserved and so forth. So during this review, our attorneys really dug in and did a lot of research in terms of how best to address our ordinance relative to that court case. So that kind of became the second task out of that, while not directly part of the city council's initial motion. Obviously, our attorneys want to make sure that our ordinance as they stand are fully defendable, and obviously at this point, we feel that they are if this amendment does go through. So with that being said, the Canton decision itself, when it kind of came through, basically said you cannot generically write ordinances that regulate trees and replacement of trees or the payment in lieu of replacement of trees. Each tree preservation action must be based off of a specific site and a specific tally of those trees and what the quality of those trees are and what those trees mean to that particular site as well as the overall general area, if you will. So just simply saying we're going to copy and paste in other communities' ordinances and they say 50% is a great number, we're going to do 50% and that's just how it's going to be, wasn't really the way that the court felt this should all occur. So we've amended our ordinances to try to address that. So again, in terms of what we've done, this ordinance, I want to remind everyone, is for development sites. It does not touch individual single-family residences. The only sites it does touch is single-family zoning that is intended to be developed, again, not an individual residence, and then obviously any multiple-family, then non-residential sites that are to be developed, as well as now with the landmark tree provision, basically saying that any site that has been developed would also be subject to replacement as well. Of particular note, and as with our past practice since their creation, the City Sustainability Commission did review this. They reviewed it for 3 months. Rather in depth with the city attorneys, and I'm sure the city attorneys will acknowledge that the Sustainability Commission put them through their paces in terms of requirements and what-if scenarios based on everything that we were looking to do. So with that being said, the items that changed in the ordinance, we did some housekeeping items that dealt with permit processing and responsible parties, just in terms of language and designated parties that were doing things, nothing major there. The landmark tree provision or preservation requirement is now for all sites. That was been clarified. So if someone does have an existing shopping center and they have a landmark tree that's on that shopping center, they decide to take it down, they will be subject to the preservation requirements or the potential replacement requirements. So again, that's been clarified. Then in terms of the customization based on the Canton case, that's where a lot of the language got really kind of changed. So the 50% is still uniform, nothing changes there. But the way that it kind of gets calculated may change slightly. So with that being said, we have our standard formula, 50% preservation, 100% preservation of landmark trees. That's what our ordinance says. And developer or someone looking to develop property or remove trees as part of development can then challenge the ordinance, if they will, or challenge that interpretation to say, we feel that these trees are not of a good quality and therefore your standard requirements should not be applicable. To combat that, we've indicated that an arborist can then be brought in to determine the quality of that tree or tree stand and whether or not its typical provisions should be applied or whether or not a reduced rate, so to speak, can be applicable based on the quality of those trees that are there in that process. So again, that's kind of our way of determining or combating the Canton case, to say if someone doesn't feel our ordinance is valid, or someone doesn't feel that the way we're treating their particular site is in conjunction or in concurrent with the Canton opinion, this is our provision that kind of keeps us in line with it, as at least we feel it does. And then finally, the other option is obviously providing tree replacements and depositing monies in the tree preservation fund. So keeping in mind, any of these provisions can be used in conjunction as individual or in conjunction with one another. So you can simply preserve trees on your site and just be done. You can preserve and part trees on your site and then plant others. You can basically appeal the ordinance to try to reduce your rate, or ultimately you could just pay into the city's tree fund based on the requirements of the city at that particular time for the cost of a tree. The one other thing that was changed in the ordinance after further review, right now, the way the ordinance stands, if you are going to pay into the city's tree fund, you have to pay in at a rate of 1.5 times your replacement number. The legal team felt that that number should be reduced to a single 1-to-1 ratio, thereby limiting the amount of money that's put into the tree preservation fund. That was one of the big issues with the Canton case, was that the numbers got so outrageous so quickly based on a generic calculation that there was concern that a simple multiplier that wasn't tied to anything may be putting the city at risk. So the thought was to reduce that basically down to, again, a 1-to-1 multiplier. So with that, city administration, at least the Office of Planning, does recommend the introduction of the ordinance, and the Sustainability Commission at their June meeting also recommended approval of introduction or approval of the ordinance as currently drafted. So with that, any questions that council may have, I'd be more than glad to try to answer them.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. McLeod. Is there anyone in the audience who'd like to speak on this item? Not, council, we need a motion.
Mayor Taylor.
Mrs. Sarowski.
Resolved to introduce the ordinance amending Article 3 of Chapter 51 to the City Code to update the process for obtaining a tree removal permit and the standards for tree replacement.
Support.
Been moved and supported. Any discussion, Mrs. Sarowski?
No, I think Mr. McLeod very well explained it, and I'm not going to question him.
Okay. Council, anyone else?
Mr. Mayor,
Mr. Radke?
I'm sorry. I didn't hear,
It's okay.
I didn't hear Mr. Radke.
Would you like to go first, Henry?
No, you go ahead.
No
We'll
worries.
get
You have the floor, sir.
We'll get you next, Mr. Yanez.
Just very briefly, I read the minutes of the Sustainability Commission, and they really did put some work in on this. And I appreciate their hard work because they clearly tried to analyze it from all angles. With that being said, I have some questions. First, I guess we'll start at the last, which is, I can understand the viewpoint of reducing the modifier requirement on trees based upon the Canton opinion in the Sixth Circuit Court of Appeals. But what I don't understand is, we impose fees for all types of services at the city. So if we have to replant a tree and take care of a tree because someone refused to take care of it on site, I feel like we're not getting properly reimbursed for the cost. If you can clear cut a field and say, well, the trees cost, I'm gonna make up a number here, $1,000. I give $1,000 to the city. Well, the city's gonna, just implementing that is gonna cost us a lot more because we're gonna have to hire a tree service to one, I assume, plant it. Then we're gonna have to water it. We're gonna have to trim it for years. We're gonna do other things. So I don't know if we're properly capturing the cost of replacement by just reducing it to a one-on-one. And while a 1.5 modifier might be just totally out of whack and obviously not defensible in court, we charge, for example, a fee for an inspection of your home or a fee for a permit to get occupancy for your home. Now, I'm sure we don't make an individualized assessment for each home where if a home is bigger, we charge more. If a home is smaller, we charge less. We charge for the effort, the time that we have to put in to do it. So I'm curious why we do not, if we're going to go to a one-to-one tree replacement, why we don't also add an administration fee on top of it for our time and effort to implement this. So I guess through the chair to the city attorney, have we considered this? And if we haven't, should we consider this?
Mr. Koszewski.
I'm trying to look right now for what that replacement cost is. And I do believe we include our administrative fee, but I'll ask Mr. McLeod that.
So, yeah, thank you. So our fee is basically the same fee that we charge for a street tree to a resident through DPW. So that cost already includes planting, getting it in the ground through our service. So we felt that was the simplest way to do it from the standpoint, and that's been in place since the last amendment in 2021, where we simply said, if we're going to be putting these in street rights of way, it's no different than anyone else doing it than an individual home. So that already puts in to account administration of getting it to the ground, getting it planted. Obviously, ultimately, there is additional cost, for pruning and watering going forward, but that's with really any street tree that goes in, even for the residents individually.
So what was the thinking, through the chair of the city attorney, what was the thinking with the 1.5 modifier? Was it just to try to encourage people to keep trees on site? Or I guess, how is it, because right now it sounds like it's not defensible, so I'm curious.
Well, I believe prior to when we were doing the ordinance, we were looking at some sort of penalty fee if there was a issue there. Given the Canton case, we felt that no longer was applicable.
With the Canton case in mind, is there anything that we can do to try to encourage developers to keep trees on site? Because with this new ordinance, I'm afraid they're going to go back to, they already do it, but they're going to go back to even more clear cutting the sites and then just saying, I'll stick the city with the responsibility of keeping the trees.
Well, unfortunately, the Canton decision puts us in a bad spot because we can't force them to keep trees. We can encourage them through this ordinance to replace as many trees as possible. If you take down a landmark tree, you're going to be planting more trees than if you take down a landmark tree. And that will take up more space on their property as well. And then paying into the fund, most developers don't want to do that to begin with. So that it encourages them by virtue of the ordinance itself.
I'm just curious, because obviously we want to try to encourage people to keep the trees on their property. And I don't think that this ordinance goes far enough to try to encourage them. Maybe we can't charge a penalty, but maybe there's some other way we can put our thinking caps on, try to encourage trees to remain on site. Because the idea of the Sixth Circuit's opinion just says that people can just clear cut lots for trees. Maybe that's not what they were thinking. That's going to be the purpose. And it's going to lead to a very detrimental effect, not just to Sterling Heights, but to every city and township across the state that has a tree preservation ordinance. And we do this not just because trees are valuable, which they are, but they add to sustainability, they add to tree canopy, they add to water retention, preventing flooding. They cool our neighborhood, so we have to use less air conditioning, especially as it gets hotter and hotter. You know, global warming is real, and it's happening. So I think that the Sixth Circuit, and I'm not afraid if people sue us over this, I'm ready to fight over it. I think the Sixth Circuit thought about it just in a monetary terms. What's lumber worth? And I'm thinking about it more in the, what's it worth to my residents to live in an area that has no trees? And I'll tell you, the New York Times has studies on this. Areas that have fewer trees are poorer, they're hotter, they are not worth as much money, and they are not popular to live in. So I argue that we need to really think about this. But I'll put that to the side for now, because we have another week to talk about this. Secondly, I want to understand why we're exempting single-family homes in our city from at least the landmark tree preservation requirement. Mr. McLeod, if you would, to the chair.
Mr. McLeod?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think there's a couple different reasons why this draft doesn't do that. One, going back to September of '21, when we were tasked with the landmark provisions, I think the scope was pretty narrow in terms of what we were directed to do, in terms of bringing landmark trees to develop sites, there was a particular apartment building that really kind of triggered the whole thing. And there was a couple other sites that were kind of issues as well, but there was really one that kind of brought it to the forefront. So I think our scope, number one, limited, where we're really going with the landmark tree provisions for non-residential sites. Two is, I think, if city council as a whole or as a majority wanted to go in that direction, that would be a little bit more holistic approach in terms of how we look at that ordinance. Because with the number of residential sites that we have in the city, that would be more than just simply, putting a number or putting a clause into an ordinance. That would realistically be staffing changes in terms of probably at least a person on the upfront, person on the back end, dealing with processing permits of that nature. And then obviously, if a tree was taken down without a permit, you're kind of recreating the crime scene, so to speak, and then kind of going through and taking up a lot of time in terms of staff hours of trying to figure out exactly what happens there. The other item, and not that it's necessarily a huge issue, but it's something to take into consideration, is if with a single family home, for instance, if you take your typical landmark tree, which is 32 inches in caliper, based on our formulas, you would have to replant 11 trees for that single family home, based on the current formula.
11 trees at what size?
3-inch caliper.
Right, 11 3-inch caliper trees to replace the 32-inch tree that was taken down.
That is correct. And so one would be the question of on let's say a typical 60 or 80-foot wide lot, whether you could physically plant 11 trees in addition to your house, your driveway, garage, all those good things. And then is that automatically then forcing people to pay into a tree fund if they can't plant those 11 trees on their particular site? But the point being is that is a much broader net. That is a much different ordinance in my mind than what we have here. Again, it's when the ordinance is already applying to non-residential sites, and then you say, we're just going to clarify that it really fully applies to non-residential sites. That's one task. If council, again, as a majority wants to say, let's look at this across the board in every single zoning district, then I think that might be a different direction or a different directive of council. And we can look at that by all means, but like I said, I think that then gets into not only ordinance, but also gets into budget, gets into staffing, gets into, a lot more administration going forward.
No, I understand that. It's my understanding that Ann Arbor regulates all trees over 6 inches in their city. That as part of their, so I guess, I believe you used to work in Ann Arbor. Do they have a forestry division? No, you didn't work in Ann Arbor?
I did not know.
Okay, I apologize. I thought you did. But they used to have do they have a forestry division? How does Ann Arbor, I guess, deal with this problem? Because they regulate all, and we like to compare ourselves to Ann Arbor. When we were looking at the city manager's pay, we compared ourselves to Ann Arbor. Ann Arbor's a city of our size. So I always find it shocking when something that seems to work in another city, we bring it here and everybody says, well, we can't do it. Is it because we're only in Macomb County? Because other cities and other counties manage to do these things without, I hope, too much work involved. But I'm just curious. 'Cause in Ann Arbor, I know for a fact Ann Arbor's ordinance regulates all trees on all sites over 6 inches in caliper, which is not what I'm proposing here in Sterling Heights, but that is their ordinance.
Yeah, Mr. McLeod.
Sure, thank you, Mr. Mayor. No, I mean, obviously, different communities staff differently. And so, and I don't know Ann Arbor staffing levels, but I know that they do have a pretty significant environmental team there that deals with not only trees, but also deals with environmental issues, carbon footprints, all those kinds of good things. So they have an entire staff, and I don't know what that number is, but I know they do staff it that way. For instance, in West Bloomfield, where I did come from prior to this.
Oh, I apologize. My mistake.
That's okay.
Must have
They had an environmental scientist on staff, and they had environmental consultants. I mean, so, because for them, and he dealt with both wetlands and woodlands. I mean, but then they supplemented that with a consultant. So, I mean, there are ways to do it. I mean, then, so that's, and again, that's a broader scope. And, but obviously, yes, communities do it when, when there's a will, there's a way. And, if that's, again, the direction of council, by all means, I think, again, I think we were tasked with one specific thing, and then obviously the Canton decision came up, and as all good attorneys will, they'll say, well, we need to make sure that the ordinance is solid at this point. Since we already had it open, it was convenient. But again, if there's a larger view of this that wants to go wider in terms of the number of trees we regulate, I think that would be an additional directive of council. Then again, that's a larger viewpoint and of how we handle that. Can it happen? Absolutely. It's just a matter of setting the table for it and then, dedicating the funds to do it. One of the other things that you'd probably have to do, to be honest with you, is probably do an entire tree survey of the city.
We're doing right now, are we not?
Well, in public rights of way.
Okay.
Realistically, you would have to probably do one, unless it's a reactionary stance, but if you want to be a proactive stance, you would develop an entire survey of the city and then have to keep it updated. So you'd have to continuously go back and say, okay, well, last year this tree was 10 inches, now it's 12. This last year this was 32 inches, now it's 40. So you'd have to make sure that that information is constantly updated. So there's obviously a cost to that, and that's why I said that's a much different scope from where this amendment originally came from.
Well, through the chair to Mr. Koszybski, could we regulate trees on individual single-family home property differently than we do to development lots? For example, if we wanted, I'm just making this up, I don't have a choice. If we wanted to say that if you take down for example, a regulated tree, a landmark tree on an individual lot, could we make the tree preservation requirement half of what the normal landmark tree requirements would be?
Mr. Koszybski?
Thank you, Mr. Radke. Yes, I guess the answer is more on a policy decision. So the reason that we would look at these larger sites is because there's more clear cutting, there's more immediate impact to the overall canopy. When you're taking down one tree on a property, on a residential property, it doesn't have the same impact to the community as taking down 100 trees in a non-developed property. So we took a position with respect to how we treat these commercial sites differently than residential. And yes, under that same theory, you could come up with some scheme or some way to change the numbers for residential based on the impact to the community, just like we did with the non-residential areas.
I appreciate that. So I guess I'm concerned, because I live in the south end. In the south end of the city, trees are coming down at an alarming rate. I've counted 13 landmark trees that were taken down in my father's neighborhood this year. Since I started paying attention in March till just last week when another one was cut down. And they all were over the size limits that we would have for calipers. One of them was a catalpa that was over 75 years old. And I don't think we plant catalpas anymore because they can be unsightly, but it was over 3 feet in diameter. It was an amazing tree that was cut down. So I am all for this ordinance as it's written to get it forward, but I think we really need to start analyzing how we treat trees on single-family homes, because this city is a majority of single-family lots. If we don't attack the majority of our city, which is single-family lots, we're never going to get to the solution that we're trying to do here. Right-of-way trees, which we've proposed, are a nice start, and we're going to get there. But at the end of the day, if all we're doing is planting 3-inch caliper trees in the right-of-way, people are taking down 4-foot in diameter trees all across the city, our tree canopy is continuing to decrease. It's decreased almost every year, I believe, I've been on council so far. So it's stabilized, but it's not rising. Until we take a proactive step to regulate these trees, and Ann Arbor has, I'm not saying we should do an Ann Arbor type ordinance, but I think that they understand the value of these trees and green spaces. So I would like to think about that, and hopefully, I guess without objection, if the city administration could really evaluate how other cities have done this on single-family lots, just a report. Not asking for anything beyond that, a report on how other cities have approached this issue, what it costs them, because, you know, we are a little bit concerned about cost. You know, what, do they have a forestry division? Do they have people whose sole devotion is to this? Comparative communities. And I'd like to get information on that, because while I'll move forward with this as it's written, I think that we really do need to approach the protection of the landmark trees, because another summer like this one in the south end, there will be none left. I am convinced, because they've been coming down at an alarming rate just in the 3 blocks around my father's house. That's all I have, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Radke.
Mayor Taylor?
Mrs. Schmidt?
Thank you. I have no objection with the ordinance as it's written. I think it's important that we do hold developers accountable to replacing trees. As far as Mr. Radke's idea on residential, I have to say, as a homeowner, I think it's an overreach for the city to tell you that you can't cut down a tree on your own property and what you have to do afterwards. I take exception to that, and I understand that there are, you know, large trees. I have a large catalpa tree right now in my backyard that we're probably going to be taking down because we don't want it falling on my neighbor's house. So, you know, there are reasons, and to really question a homeowner, a property owner, on why they want to take a tree down and force them to replace it, I think is an overreach. So I do object to that, and I have nothing further.
Okay, council on Mr. Yanez.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I tend to agree with Mr. Radke on this issue, especially with the cost of the tree. For me, it is also a financial consideration. Through the chair to Mr. McLeod. Mr. McLeod, you gave us the example of a landmark tree being, you know, 33 inches, 30 inches? 32. 32, 33, whatever it takes. And we're replacing with 11 trees, but can we actually measure the canopy that we're losing? So now we're taking a mature tree that does all the things that Mr. Radke talked about, the canopy, absorption of water and so forth, and we're replacing it with 11 younger trees. And what size are these trees? How tall are we, just off the top of your head? 15 feet, 12 feet?
Yeah, realistically, at a 3-inch caliper, depending on the tree, 10 to 15 feet.
10 to 15 feet. So these trees are not doing the job that the tree that got cut down was doing. And when you look at even a dirty tree like a cottonwood, still has a huge a canopy. And we had a very long discussion here, you know, some time ago about increasing our tree canopy in the city, and now we're losing that. The other thing is, what is the value of a 100-year-old oak or maple? When I play in a golf league at Maple Lane, and then eventually I think it's going to get developed. I don't think those trees are going into a grinder. I think those trees are probably going to get cut down, they're going to get sold, and those trees are going to get turned into lumber. And it's going to be very expensive oak and maple lumber that somebody's going to use. And I always thought that even a developer might cut it down and those trees down, and they'll leave the dirty trees up and cut the oaks and maples down. But there doesn't seem to be a proper exchange in value. I don't know 1.5 is the right number, 1 is the right number, but to the point that was expressed earlier, I think this is going to cost us not only financially, but it will also cost us environmentally as well. And we need to make sure that we are, the city as a whole, is properly compensated. So I too will vote for this, but I think we really need to take a much deeper dive on what this is costing the city, both financially and environmentally. And that's all I have, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Yanez. Mrs. Zarko.
Yes, thank you, Mayor Taylor. I guess, we're looking at this as moving forward. Some of my concerns are actually what's happened in the past. And since we've had a tree preservation ordinance since 1978 for developers, and I'm sure that there was some site plans that went in there for landscaping, and over the years, if these trees are taken down for whatever reason, do we have any recourse to go back to these sites and have them replant what has been taken down? So that would be through the chair to Mr. McLeod.
Mr. McLeod.
So is the question a recourse to have trees replanted that were part of an approved site plan?
Correct.
So we absolutely do. City code enforcement does that on a regular basis. So as they determine or as they see a site that is what they feel is out of compliance with an approved site plan, or maybe, the process goes is that they will come to the planning office and request that landscape plan. They'll go out and make sure that the landscape plan is being complied with. If it's not, then obviously they start a code issue with it, a notice of violation, and then the trees or shrubs, whatever the case may be, get planted. And now our ordinance does even further that by saying if they are out of whack or out of compliance, the city does have the ability to bring them into current requirements for landscaping, which would then even further the amount of landscaping from a site plan that may have been approved, 20, 30, 40 years ago.
Okay. Thank you. That was my question about the ordinance as it sits right now. The residential requirements, I'm going to hesitate on this a little because I think it is a little bit of an overreach for a couple of reasons. Is people, when they landscape their own homes, do that in their own personal style. And a new homeowner coming in certainly might take down a tree that they don't want. I mean, I have a tree that's in my backyard right now that's over 40 years old, and I know that what the root system has done, even though it has been maintained and trimmed, what it's done to my backyard, what it's done to, the root system going under the patio. So I think a new homeowner coming in shouldn't have to, keep it there if they don't want to. I mean, so I think there's a lot more that would have to be done on the research for any kind of changes in the residential requirements right now. So I'm in favor of what we're doing tonight. You answered my question about recourse on older sites, and I'm okay. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Zarko. Mrs. Konski.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm in favor of the ordinance tonight as written. In regard to the single-family restrictions, if someone is going to take down a tree on their personal property, there's going to be a reason for it. Whether it's endangering the neighbor's house, if the tree looks like it's going to break and hurt somebody, that's about the only reason that I'm familiar with that anybody would take down a tree. I checked out some tree removals a couple of years back, and it's a bit expensive to take down a tree. He quoted me $750 to take down a tree. So I don't think people would be arbitrarily taking down a tree. Usually there's a reason for it. If it's become dangerous to their property or the neighbor's property, or maybe they want to change the landscaping and put something fresh and new in there. So I'm not in favor of doing an ordinance addressing single-family homes. I think that's something that's going a little bit too far. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mrs. Konski. Mrs. Strauss.
Thank you. I do appreciate you giving me a second chance at this. So I do want to just weigh in on that as well, on single-family home property owners, and just say that, yes, I do also believe that it would be an overreach to require any property owner to not touch their own personal trees. Again, as many of my council members have said, it is their own tree. It is their own property, and they should have the right to do with those trees as they would like, although I am love trees, called myself a tree hugger for years. I cried when my catalpa got hit by a lightning and we had to cut it down. So I hate to cut down trees, and yes, they are expensive. In Deanna, it's now about $1,000 to cut down a tree and grind a stump. So it is very expensive, and I would hate to see a tree come down, but that is still within, I believe, a property owner's right to do so. So I would never be in favor of fining or putting some type of a restriction against that for personal property owners. So just wanted to weigh in on that. So thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Mrs. Sarowski.
Mr. Mayor, just briefly.
Go ahead, Mr. Radke.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think the problem has been well defined by my colleagues up here on the council. Individually, one person taking down a tree is no problem. It's that when everyone thinks I have a right to take down my tree and now we have no trees, that's the problem. You know, I'll be like the Lorax. I'll speak for the trees. And I will say that while in a vacuum, any one property taking down one tree is not a big deal. In my father's neighborhood in the south side, there have been 13 trees taken down in 3 blocks. So while each individual person might have an individualized idea or reason for taking down that tree, in aggregate, there are almost no trees left on those blocks in my dad's neighborhood. So that's why you'd establish a policy. And then also, you know, we have developers in the room today. They would argue that that tree is their property too, and we're forcing them to protect it. We're forcing them to replace it. You know, I have no problem hitting developers in the pocketbook, but if we really want to protect the tree canopy, we need to make sure that everyone has a foot in the game or has a piece in the game. And that's all I have, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, Mr. Yanis.
Sorry, Mr. Mayor, I didn't think we'd do a second round on tree preservation, but we are.
Well, we're having a great dendrological discussion, Mr. Denault. Look it up.
Someone's got their dictionary.
Thank goodness, thank God for Google.
How do you spell that?
It's D-E, let me check.
So I'm sitting here listening to this discussion amongst my colleagues, and it seems to me that we're proposing an either or. You know, either we force people to keep their trees or we don't. I don't think it's an either or. You know, people cut their trees down or remove their trees or trim their trees up for a completely variety of reasons. And, you know, maybe this is something that we should be doing as a city, is working with people to find out, you know, if they have any questions. You know, we got the Ask the Inspector program. Maybe we should ask the Tree Guy program, and to find out if someone's having a problem with the tree, what is the problem? And is it just a maintenance problem? Is it just, you know, they just don't like the look of it? I mean, let's face it, large trees in the backyard clog your gutters, the leaves blow into the neighbors, the twigs blow into the neighbor's yard, the neighbor gets mad because you don't come and clean up your tree out of their yard. You know, this is true, right? I've been approached, we've probably all been approached by people on this issue. I don't think this is an either or. We talked in depth, at length, about increasing our tree canopy. And we want to make sure that people aren't cutting their trees down just because that's, you know, what they felt like doing, and it's their yard and it's their tree. And maybe education, maybe some sort of help from the city or the county or whatever, we can maintain that tree canopy within our city, help these homeowners, you know, what have you. Anyways, I just don't think this is an either or conversation. I think that we can, we're smart enough here. The people who live out there are smart enough, the homeowners are smart enough to maybe come together and work on this issue, because the one common goal is, as Mr. Radke pointed out, is the environmental impact of all our trees in our tree canopy, and this is what we should try to preserve. So I just hope that we continue this discussion and we try to preserve and maintain our tree canopy while we still maintain homeowners' rights. Thank you. That's all I have, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you, Mr.
And no, and I won't ask for a third time.
You won't get one.
That's why I'm not asking.
Could I have a second time?
Yeah, Mr. Smith.
It'll be brief.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay, so speaking of adding this residential, we kind of went off track here, but Mr. McLeod stated that if we did do something residential, we would have to do an annual tree survey, which would cost a lot of money, a lot of manpower. And you know what? Before I spend the money doing that, I want 2 more social workers for Amy Compton. Because I think, you know, that is a very important resource in our community. So I think that, I'm not against trees, but I'm also for property rights too. So that's all I have.
Okay,
So there.
okay, I get to go twice now.
Yeah, you do.
No,
Twice as long.
you usually go long enough.
Look, I don't really want to comment on what a residential tree ordinance would look like. I mean, I appreciate that this was a good discussion and it's helpful in, creating new policies potentially in the future, but we don't have a residential tree ordinance in front of us. We don't know what it would look like. We don't know what it would cost. We don't know how it would be implemented. So I'm going to reserve comment on that until such a, proposal is presented to us. In the meantime, I do think that this is a bit confusing, but given especially the decision that was rendered in the Canton decision, but I think we get to where we want to be with this ordinance as far as we can get. I would say to Mr. Yanez, to your point that it's not an either or, I think that's absolutely right. I think what the city can do, it's more, we talk about, like for example, Mr. Yanez, you always talk about, when a snow emergency comes, how do we get people to know you don't park on the street? It's not good. You gotta keep the street cleared so that the plow can get down, and it's dangerous and it's helpful to all the residents. It's more than just education. There's gotta be a way that, we can get the information and get people to comply and do what is in their best interest, without being heavy-handed. And there's this book I recently read called Nudge. It's about just how do you just make things, and really the premise is, if government or a business or anybody is going to do something and wants other people to do it, you just got to make it as easy as possible. So I would say we should be focusing our energy, Mr. McLeod, Mr. Koszubski, Mr. Denal, Mr. Vanderpool, and really us as well as the policymakers, focusing our attention on how do we make it as easy as possible for people to keep the trees that they have, preserve the trees that they have, plant new trees if they do need to take their trees down. And so I would propose, let's start thinking of it in those terms. What do we do to force people to do these things, but how do we make it as easy as possible for people out there to increase the tree canopy citywide? Because the seven of us, we can't do it. I mean, there's not enough money we could possibly throw at this to make a meaningful impact on the city's tree canopy over the next 3 to 5 years. I mean, I think we'd all agree with that. Yep. That we could spend $100 million on trees and we still wouldn't get to where we need to be. So this is a decades-long plan. This is something that really we have to look at the next 50 years of the city and start doing it now so that 50 to 100 years from now, the city continues to have those benefits. And I do believe that the best way we can do it is by all of us focusing on making it as easy as possible for homeowners, for developers, and for anybody else to keep the trees they have, plant new trees. And so let's I'd say focus our energy on that, and then see what results we can start getting. So with that, I am going to close this discussion, which was a good one. And all those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, motion carries. All right, next on our agenda tonight is an ordinance adoption, and this is to consider adoption of an ordinance amending Chapter 2, Article 5 of the City Code for the purpose of implementing changes in the benefits paid to eligible personnel of the 41A Judicial District Court. Is there anyone in the audience who'd like to speak on this item? If not, council, we need a motion.
Mayor Taylor, before we speak on this, I need to abstain from this vote.
Understood, and for the reasons stated on the record at the last city council meeting. Okay, Mrs. Schmidt?
Thank you. To adopt the ordinance amending Chapter 2, Article 5 of the City Code for the purpose of implementing changes in the benefits paid to eligible personnel of the 41A Judicial District Court.
Support.
It's been moved and supported. Any discussion?
I think it was explained. Thank you.
Council, with no further discussion, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. All right, next item on our agenda is the consent agenda with the omission of item H. Is there anyone in the audience who'd like to speak on any item on tonight's consent agenda with the omission of H. If not, council, we need a motion.
Mr. Mayor,
Mrs. Kosky.
move to approve the consent agenda as amended.
Support.
It's been moved and supported with no discussion. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, motion carries. Next item on our agenda is a consideration item, and this is to consider a request to transfer ownership of a 2021 Class C liquor license business located at 33120-33126 Ryan Road from Alkosh Restaurant Incorporated to Ryan 14 Incorporated. Appears we do have a presentation. Sir?
Was I not to be called upon yet?
No, it's,
Okay.
this is the appropriate time.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Seat there. My name is Robert Erie. I represent the petitioner in this matter. Good evening, Mayor and City Council. Just a brief comment before I get into the petition. When I first began to practice law, I started right down the street as a law clerk. I don't know if any of you remember the house that used to be a law office almost to Van Dyke, Howard, Kistner, and Dranchek was the name of the law firm back then. I was a law clerk there. I hate to tell you how many years ago, but my gray hair will tell you it was a lot.
Andy.
Nevertheless, I represent the petitioner tonight, and this is a request to allow the transfer of a Class C liquor license with dance and entertainment permit and extended hours permit from El Chirac to the Ryan 14 Corporation, and they're going to run a restaurant. I went there this afternoon to take a look at it, and I understand this restaurant has been in the city for some time. These are new owners. There are two of them. They are both sitting behind me. Each will have a 50% interest in this restaurant. Mr. Garmo, who is directly behind me, has had a liquor license for, I don't think he currently has one, but he has had one for many, many years, never been suspended, revoked, or had any serious difficulties. I don't think that Tamara, who is a 50% owner and going to be a 50% owner, has ever had a liquor license, but she is going to be assisting with this restaurant. The liquor license will be in the name of the Ryan 14 restaurant, and they look forward to opening with Middle Eastern food, and it's a 70-seat restaurant. They look forward to participating in the life of Sterling Heights, and both I and they are ready for any questions that you might have.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Erie. What we'll do is we'll take comments from the rest of the audience, if there are any. If there aren't, then the council will make a motion, deliberate on it, and ask any questions that they might have for you. Okay? Yeah, you can take a seat at this point. We'll call you back up if we need you. Okay, at this point, I'll open up to the audience. Anyone else have any comments on this agenda item? If not, council, we need a motion.
Mr. Mayor,
Mr. Radke.
resolved that the request to transfer ownership of a 2021 Class C liquor licensed business with Sunday sales permit, AM and PM, dance entertainment permit, and extended hours dance entertainment located at 33120-33126 Ryan Road, Sterling Heights, Michigan, 48310, from Alkosh Restaurant, Inc. to Ryan 14, Inc. be considered for approval.
Support. It's been moved and supported. Any discussion, Mr. Radke?
Briefly, I had the opportunity to meet with the owners of this new restaurant earlier this week. They showed a real commitment to the city and to really run the restaurant very well. They have run restaurants in the past in Troy and other cities. I think they'll be a great new owner compared to what was there before, and I think they're going to do a great job. That's all I have, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Radke. Council, anyone else? No further discussion. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Congratulations. Good luck. We look forward to having you in the community and look forward to trying it out, okay? Thank you. All right.
Elise Montessori approach to this petition, and I think I pronounced it about as well as Don did.
Thank you, guys.
All right, Next up is another consideration item. This is to consider an amendment and restated planned unit development agreement for the PUD development of 7.85 acres of land situated on the west side of Shana Road, south of Hall Road, PPUD 1-0001. We have a presentation again from our city planner, Mr. McLeod.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, Council, Mr. Vanderpool. As you noted, Mayor, before you tonight is a potential PUD amendment for PUD 21-0001. This was originally approved on June 15th of 21, where it was approved for 126 units of 1 and 2 bedroom apartment-style living for this residential building, which sits just south of Hall Road on the west side of Shaner. The current request before you is for an additional 3 one-bedroom units to be added to one to each floor, if you will. This is a 4-story building, but the top 3 floors, floors 2, 3, and 4 are all the same. So the applicant did find additional room within their floor plan to potentially add these additional units. There are 0 exterior modifications being requested. The alterations are solely within the building itself. Parking is sufficient based on the additional units, keeping in mind that this is cross-parked, and you'll see that in 1 second when you take a look at the renderings and drawings. But this is cross-parked with the existing shopping center that's located there. This request would provide additional modification, if you will. Modifications are the fancy word that we use in the PUD language for variances. One would be the additional density to go to 129. There's already a modification to allow it to go to 126. There'd be no additional recreation space being added. Modification was previously granted. Based on the number of units, an additional 1,500 square feet of recreation space technically would be required. And then the one-bedroom unit size of 542 square feet, our normal requirement is 600 square feet. That would be an additional modification there as well. Just to kind of refamiliarize yourself with the site, and again, this is kind of where it sits relative to Lakeside in the top right portion of the screen. Shaner Road kind of running from top left to bottom right. Hall Road in the top left corner. The white dotted area is the area of construction. Aerial rendering of the site here itself, again, 4-story construction sitting next to the shopping center in front of the place of worship next to the Wendy's directly to the north of it. Again, just kind of showing some of these renderings. This was the recreation space that was all ultimately determined to be the appropriate recreation space for the proposal when it was originally approved in June of 21. Kind of a formal, more urban style recreation space rather than the more open green space that we're used to in terms of a more suburban type setting. Again, this is obviously a much more urban setting sitting within the area of Lakeside proper that would ultimately hopefully be redeveloped in a much more urban fashion, and this one could be. This site is obviously going to be one of the forefront of that redevelopment opportunity. This shows the Shaner Road frontage, how it would appear as you drove past the site, so to speak, providing obviously a mixture of materials between metal, siding, metal, and then composite siding, and then burnished block, providing a very modernistic type approach to the overall architecture. This provides the overall floor plan. If you look to the top left-hand corner of that floor plan on the top, that goldish orange color is the one modified unit. Multiply that by 3, 1 for each floor, gives you the 3 additional requested units that are being requested. This shows a little bit closer in terms of what that corner of the building would look like. But again, no exterior modifications, no changes to the building footprint. Parking calculations are fine. Like I said, it would simply be an addendum to the number of units being proposed, as well as some further modifications. So those are already being requested or already approved as part of the development. So with that, I'll be more than glad to answer any questions that council might have.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. McLeod. See, the applicant is here. Anything, Mr. Gallo, to add to that?
No, Mr. Mayor, good evening, council. And, Mayor, I do have Andy Wakeland, our engineer, and also Mark Shovers here with us. One thing that was not mentioned, I'd like to just also mention is on the first floor, we've added a bike storage facility. So it'll be an amenity basically for the residents. We could have fit another unit in there, but we thought that having that additional space for the residents' bikes would be appropriate. So we hope we get your support this evening.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gallo. All right, I'll open it up to the audience. Is there anyone here who would like to comment on this item? Mr. Nelson?
No, I'm not here to complain about 3 extra units. What I am is I just wanted to pass along, since I live off of Shaner, there's a little name for this development that's been passed around. It's called the Great Wall of Windows. Shaner Great Wall of Windows. All you see going south is big wall of windows. I know they're gonna break it up with a little additional metal and other, so that it doesn't look like just a wall of windows, but right now it does. Another question that was brought to me by one of our residents was, when you look at the layout of this property, it's 7.8 acres, and that's what it is on the entire PUD. We believe that this amendment is just the first of many to come. The only way it makes sense is for that retail center to be gone and to put up a facing apartment complex. And mark my word, it will be here. It will be here. That's the way this whole thing was put together. There's also, in the layout plan, just one question I might ask Mr. Gallo to, what they meant. It's on the layout plan, about the 5th page into this package. It calls the shopping center the ex-shopping center, and it calls the Heritage Church the ex-Heritage Church.
Existing.
Existing.
I'd like to know what that means.
Existing.
Okay, it's not example.
Existing.
Existing.
Existing shopping center.
Oh, okay. All right, I was hoping that it was the X, so that they could just put in for their amendment right now. That's all. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Nelson. Yes, sir.
Joe Znoy, 34330 Centennial Court. Good evening, Mayor and Council. Not satisfied with having an initial PUD application approved, this developer is now scurrying to City Council like some devious version of Oliver Twist, begging, "Please, sir, I want some more." Let's not kid ourselves that this is some sudden epiphany on the developer's part, that he could shoehorn in a few more units once construction is underway. I believe this backup strategy was planned at the outset to garner increased profit at the expense of future renters by decreasing single-unit space by 60 more square feet. And I may be misunderstanding this, but when I looked at the information packet, I thought it said that the recreational space was going from 64,500 square feet to 20,000 square feet, which looks like it would be a third of the space required by code. And if that's the case, I'd perceive this as a blatant example of corporate greed. At the last council meeting, I spoke out about the dire consequences of apartment overcrowding and lack of recreational space. I had no intention to be prescient, but I think we've seen another example of such consequences with the recent shooting at the Sterling Landings complex. I would like to know if council does have any standards of their own regarding how far a developer can deviate from code. By what percent can density increase? By what percent can recreational space decrease? I know Mayor Taylor has expressed disdain for codes by stating that he couldn't care less about these regulations. He seems ignorant of the true purpose of codes by asking, who are we protecting? He wants to build and build and build until there's nowhere else to build. I hope the rest of you do not share this outlook and will vote to deny this application. And I will close by asking, at long last, have we no sense of common decency? Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Zanoy. Anyone else in the audience on this item? If not, council, we need a motion.
Mayor Taylor.
Mrs. Zarko.
Resolve to approve the amended and restated planned unit development agreement between the City of Sterling Heights and Sterling Retail LLC and authorize the mayor and city clerk to sign the agreement on behalf of the city.
Support.
It's been moved and supported. Any discussion, Mrs. Zarko?
I think it's been explained, certainly through the chair to the applicant, through Mr. Gallo. Are you taking anything away by putting in these extra units?
Not at all, no.
Perfect. And the other thing, are you taking applications for these units already?
We haven't started our full marketing efforts yet. The building's still in the rough stage, but, we get phone calls and we have just a list we're assembling. But no formal leases have been signed, nor will they be until the first part of next year.
A rumor is you're sold out, so I'm just, that's the rumor.
We've had a big inquiry. We've had a lot of inquiry.
Okay, I have nothing further. I think I think as long as the actual footprint stays the same,
Yes.
and the fact that you're giving them an amenity, the tenants an amenity in the basement with the bike storage, it's fine. I think it'll work out, so.
Thank you.
Good luck.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Council, anyone else? Mrs. Schmidt.
Thank you, Mayor Taylor. Through the chair to Mr. McLeod. Mr. McLeod, the resident brought up the recreational space. That is not changing. We are not changing that tonight, correct?
Mr.
That was in
McLeod.
the original PUD.
Sorry, Ms. Schmidt.
That's okay.
Mr. McLeod.
So the original calculation received a modification from what was required under ordinance to the number for the 126 units that was approved in 2021, I apologize. Tonight, the 3 additional units technically would require an additional 1,500 square feet of recreation space. The calculation is 500 square feet per unit. So it would be a further modification, but there's no recreation space being diminished. Conversely, there's no additional recreation space being provided with the exception of the bike storage unit. But with that said, the recreation space will remain as originally approved in the 2021 PUD.
Okay, thank you. And as far as I'm concerned, the storage unit for the bike is part of recreation, so I have nothing further.
Thank you, Mrs. Schmidt. Anyone else? Mr. Radke.
Just briefly, through the chair to Mr. McLeod. To make these, I think what one of the questioners was trying to get at, and I want to just be very clear about it, to make these 3 units, was some space taken from other units that were above the rate in the city? Or, I guess, where did the space come from to create these 3 units?
In terms of the additional space, there was, I believe there was some laundry space. Trying to remember the exact floor plan where it came from. But basically, the 3 new units are the ones that are deficient per ordinance in terms of size. The remainder of the units, correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Gallo and team, but remain above the 600 square feet. So again, these units that are being added are the ones that are the deficient ones.
Excellent. I don't see a problem with this. I appreciate the bike storage facility. I think that if it's not changing the original footprint, it won't make a difference. And I have received several calls and information. People ask about the building at Lakeside, but it's in a rough state right now. It's not ready yet. And I think my colleagues up here will agree with me that some people are not thinking about the future of Lakeside, what Lakeside is going to become. They're thinking about what it is right now. And I think that once those plans hopefully get rolled out here eventually, they're going to see that this building will fit much more into what Lakeside will become and not what Lakeside is currently. That's all I have, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Radke. Anyone
Mr.
else?
Mayor.
Mr. Yanis.
Mr. Mayor, through the chair to Mr. Gallo, if you mind. I'm curious, Mr. Gallo, have you had a chance to talk to any of the store owners or that are in the plaza around there and what their thoughts are on your project and the fact that they have potential customers at their doorstep?
Well, obviously, human beings in general don't like change, right? In many instances, we have some tenants that are very excited with the possibility of having 126 new residents frequenting their stores, and we do have a couple tenants that have expressed concern. Is it going to affect my visibility? Is it going to affect, people knowing where I'm at? So we've heard mixed things, but we've always tried to address their comments in a positive way. We know that this is the first of its kind in our town in terms of a very urban type of building. And overall, the feedback has been positive, but there are a couple tenants that have expressed concerns.
All right, that's all I have. Thank you, Mr. Gallo. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, council, anyone else?
Mr. Mayor,
Mrs. Koski.
through the chair to Mr. Gallo, do you have any plans, future plans for that center?
Do I have any future plans for center in terms of what?
What you plan on doing?
Well, at the moment, we have leases that are in place, and the tenants that are under contract have the right to be there for the term of their period. It's undetermined at this time. It's unknown what we will do with the space. Right now, it's being used for retail purpose, and, but in the future, there is a possibility. There have been rumors that we're gonna tear the building down. There's been rumors that we wanna put additional apartments. What I'll tell you at the moment is we're committed to the tenants that are there, that have current leases in place, and we'll see how that ends up as the term comes up. And we'll also look at the success of the existing facility. Obviously, we have a very large investment there. We're building 129 units all at once, so it's not phased or anything else. And, you know, if there's a successful project, the future could hold plans for additional development of apartments. Or, again, the retail. So again, I don't want to commit either way, but right now, we're committed to the tenants that we have in place, and those leases we will honor and respect.
What do you own there in that center? Do you own the old theater, which is now a church? I'm assuming they're leasing.
No, so our company purchased the entire development
Right.
years ago. And as part, and we did buy the AMC movie theater, and as part of that, we did have several different tenants that wanted to come in and buy the building. We did end up selling that building to Heritage Church. They own that building, and our company owns the balance of the development.
Okay, so you own basically the strip center, the units there on, that would be the south side,
Yes,
correct?
ma'am?
And then the church owns the old theater.
Yes.
So if you wanted to, if you were very successful with the apartment building, you could replace the shopping center with another similar unit.
That could be an
Apartment
option,
complex.
yes, depending on the staggering of how the leases expire. It's a complicated issue.
Yeah, I understand that, but you have the possibility of making that a very nice center.
Yes, ma'am.
That's all I wanted to know.
Thank you.
Okay, nothing from Mrs. Sarowski.
All set, thank you.
Okay, I'm certainly in favor of this. I think it's an interesting development. I'm really excited to see how it turns out. And, you know, personally, I would say, you know, what I've heard is that I haven't heard the wall of windows comment, Mr. Nelson, but what I have heard is the sea of parking that I'm not hearing anymore. And I mean, personally, I think that when you see just endless amounts of parking, there's nothing that's more symbolic of, you know, suburban sprawl and kind of like this wasteland or wasted space than unnecessary parking. You know, I think it probably made a lot of sense. I remember going to that movie theater as a kid, and the parking lot was probably the appropriate size. And, you know, but commercial trends are certainly changing. But I'll tell you this, you know, we're hopefully right on the precipice of something really exciting happening at Lakeside Mall. And there could be, you know, lots and lots of new residential that's going in at Lakeside Mall right across the street. And maybe if there's more residential across the street at Lakeside and less commercial at Lakeside, maybe that commercial space across from this residential development all of a sudden becomes more valuable and there's more demand for it. So, I mean, again, just kind of like the tree ordinance, that's not really in front of us right now. And what happens in the future, it's too early to say whether commercial is going to come back stronger or what happens at Lakeside could definitely affect it. But in terms of this proposal tonight, I think it's really good. I think it's a creative way to get some more tenants in there without really changing the overall scope of the project. So I'm in support of it, and it sounds like it's on its way to passing. So without any further discussion, all in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Congrats. Good luck, Mr. Gallo, as always.
Thank you, everybody.
All right, next up on our agenda tonight is 9H.
10C is 9H.
So this is to approve a government service agreement between the City of Sterling Heights and Flock Group Incorporated for access to a Flock automatic license plate reader ALPR camera system with initial cost of $60,492. With this being a removal from the consent agenda, we have no presentation planned, but our chief is here. Is there anything you'd like to say, Chief, to kick us off, or do you want to wait to answer questions?
I can just wait any questions that you guys may have on this subject. So I've already presented to you during our budgetary process and had a PowerPoint. So in your backup material, everything is in there. But any questions, I'm here to answer. And I also have representatives from the company, government affairs person, and one of the regional people as well. So we can pretty much answer anything.
Okay, great. Anything you'd like to add? Or just available for questions? It's up to you.
Yeah, I'm available for questions. Laurie, I'm calling from Atlanta, Georgia with Flock Safety. Thank you, Mayor and Council, for allowing us to present tonight and answer any questions that you guys have. I just want to say for the record, our company is very transparent about our approach to public safety technology. We were built with the principle that if we all work together, businesses, neighborhoods, police and elected officials, we can eliminate crime, and that's our mission. And I think that it's important to know that some of the principles that we have in terms of privacy and civil liberties are built into our technology, and I'm happy to answer questions about that because I know that there's been some discussion in the media that you guys might have. So I'll leave it open to questions.
Okay, thank you very much. All right, at this point, I will ask the audience, is there anyone here who would like to speak on this item? Mr. Zanoy?
Thank you again, Council. Actually, I have several questions. I know that the Flock system is mostly going to be used to check out like suspicious license plates, maybe stolen cars, things of that nature, to sort of retrospectively track down hit and run drivers, which I think that's great. What I'd like to see, but I don't know if there's any legal precedent for this, or if the Flock system will be used in this manner, whether it can be used, to actually, identify speeders, people going through red lights, otherwise, disregarding the rules of the road and taking some retroactive action, ticketing them. Again, I'm not sure what the law is on this, but I would certainly be willing to hear council or our police commissioner address this. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else on this item? Yes, sir.
Mark Otto, 8532 Charles Court. Just forgive my ignorance, I haven't been to a council meeting in a while, but was this system competitively bid, negotiated, or what procurement channels were used to secure this cost or to negotiate the price of this? That's all.
Okay, thank you. We don't typically engage in back and forth, but
Yep.
we'll write your question down and get it answered for you, okay? Ms. Wright?
Hello, I have a lot to say, so excuse me if I go very quickly. Now, I was disappointed to see that some of my concerns that I brought up at the budget meeting regarding the Flock system was not in the material packet tonight. For those that don't remember or don't find budget meetings very stimulating, and so you didn't watch it, my concerns centered around privacy issues, regulations regarding who will have access to the data, and the consequences of misuse of said data, as well as the length of time that the data will be kept. As far as privacy issues, that with the length of time really go hand in hand. The more data points you have on an individual, or in this particular case, their cars, the more you're able to predict their behavior and make predictions on important things in their lives. Along with this, is this information foiable? In one of the cases I read, a man was concerned that his wife was cheating, and he subpoenaed, I'm not sure if it was Flock or another LPR company, but he subpoenaed for their data to see if he could track his wife's movement to get evidence of of her cheating. And I really don't think the city needs to be the big brother in situations like that. But I'm also concerned that it'll use up some of our resources that really are better spent elsewhere. Additionally, hopefully they can correct me, I'm glad they're here. Now, from what I'm aware, the city owns 100% of the data and the footage. However, there's a caveat that Flock has a limited, non-exclusive, royalty-free, worldwide license to use the data, including the right to include it with aggregated data that's been anonymized. Now, I'm not a tech guru, but just by a simple Google search, some people have stated that it's pretty easy to de-anonymize data. So I'm just wondering where privacy fits in with technology as far as that. Hopefully they can answer some questions. Nobody wants their data coming back later after some person has de-anonymized it and being used against them. I am going to generally say I think 30 days is too long. Some states have different requirements. I think New Hampshire only allows the data to be held for 3 minutes, others 2 weeks. I personally would feel more comfortable if my data was held for 1 to 2 weeks, not 30 days. As far as regulations go, at the budget meeting, the chief mentioned that all of our officers already have access to this data through the LEAN system, which is the Law Enforcement Information Network, and that access gets audited to make sure that misuse isn't occurring. However, the LEAN system is overseen by the Michigan State Police, and if somebody abuses the LEAN system, they can be fired, they can go to jail, they can get fines. Additionally, the jurisdiction can lose their access to LEAN, making it essentially unable to look up anyone's information. Now, even with the possibility of losing access to the system and therefore their jobs, numerous officers and other individuals have misused the system in the past. I asked MSP for their data. They weren't able to get it to me in time, so I'll give it to you once they give it to me. Councilwoman Ziarka mentioned last time that we actually had an officer who misused LEAN. I looked through that information. He saw a woman he liked. She rebuffed him. He looked up her home address, went there, and left a note for him. Now, that's not the only time in the state that that's happened. You know, I look at the most recent Richmond police chief. He used the LEAN system to look up a woman's data. A Taylor police officer was charged with 11 counts of misusing a LEAN for looking up 8 different women's information to try and go on dates with them. Memphis, Michigan police chief believed that a council person, the city clerk, and the deputy clerk got access to LEAN and got information on reserve officers. So there's a lot of examples that that show the misuse of LEAN. And so I'm concerned I'm sorry, I know I'm out of time, but there's no oversight with the Flock system. MSP isn't there to make sure that somebody's following the rules. So I really wish that the regulations on how this is going to be used, how this is going to be audited within our city was in the backup material, just so we know and so that we have more transparency. Additionally, this information can be shared with other municipalities. Please just tell us how it's going to be shared and how it's going to be audited. Thank you.
Ms. Wright. Anyone else on this item?
Probably the best use of 4 minutes I've seen in a while.
If not, council, we do need a motion. Mr. Radke, I know you pulled this off, but if you don't mind, I'll skip you and give the floor to anyone else.
Mayor Taylor.
Mrs. Zarko.
Resolved to approve the government service agreement between the City of Sterling Heights and Flock Group Incorporated, 1170 Howell Mill Road, Northwest, Suite 210, Atlanta, Georgia, 30318, and authorize the city manager to sign the agreement and any renewal of its terms and conditions on behalf of the city.
Support.
Been moved and supported. Any discussion, Mrs. Zarko?
I'll let Mr. Radke go first because he wanted it pulled.
Okay, Mr. Radke.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Mrs. Zarko. I'm going to start with my second question first, yet again, which is, I'm curious about the suggested action. So through the chair to Mr. Koszubski, it says, and authorize the city manager to sign the agreement and any renewal of its terms and conditions on behalf of the city. In most other suggested actions we have, it has a time period, what the contract length is. So I'm curious why this suggested action does not have a time period. And would this open it up for the city manager just to continually renew this contract going forward without council oversight? I guess that's my question.
Mr. Koszybski.
The city manager always has council oversight, so if there was a.
We can fire him, but I mean.
Well, no, it's more than that. If there's ever a problem with the flock system, and it came to the council's attention, the city council could make a motion to terminate the contract or to not renew it, and the city manager would be bound by that. This does authorize, however, the city manager to make that decision when there's no issues and nothing has come to council's attention or any directive from council to do otherwise. City manager would have the unilateral ability to do so. A lot of that has to do with the fact that this system will be an ongoing system, and we'll be investing into the system to do so. So I see this as a opportunity for the city manager to continue it unless council directs otherwise.
In perpetuity.
Unless council directs otherwise.
Yeah, so I have a problem with that off the start. I think that one of the reasons we have a city council here is oversight. And I think that the city council sets the term for most contracts to be a set length. And I have a problem with contracts that don't seem to come back with us. They get stuffed into the budget. We only see them when they come up with the budget ordinance as a massive group of things. You know, the same with our payments. We make payments every week. I receive them in my packet. They're dozens and dozens of pages of payments. And unless we want to get into the nitty-gritty and try to request data on each payment, they can often be hard to figure out what we're paying and for why and for what. So I would argue that at the very least, this contract should have a set length, which we then will address it again, much like we address snow plowing. We've addressed snow plowing several times now because it keeps on coming back not right. So I would argue that to Ms. Zarko and to the council, because I'm going to vote against this, but I think that we should set a set length here so that at least we address this several years down the line so we can take a look and make sure that this is working in the way that it's functioning. So I'll go back to my major point. The reason I pulled this is I am totally and utterly against license plate readers in general. I'm against the capturing of this data. I think it's a severe privacy concern, and I think that it's honestly not necessary. And then looking at an opinion from the First Circuit, we're in the Sixth here, but the First Circuit Court of Appeals, because Mr. Koszybski is very concerned about courts of appeals these days, they argue that pole-mounted cameras that monitor at length a site like a front yard that could be open to the public, which would normally not have any privacy concerns, a length of time which involves the capturing of data, that makes it unconstitutional without a warrant. So I argue that we might spend money here in perpetuity to set up systems that in the future might be ruled unconstitutional by the Supreme Court because the First Circuit opinion directly contradicts other circuits on how pole-mounted cameras are used. So I have to hope that the Supreme Court will take up a circuit split and render a decision. I think this is analogous, oh man, I can't talk today.
Analogous.
Analogous, I'm trying, right? I think this is similar. I'm not quite as good as Mr. Denault. To what happened with cell phone tracking data. For years, police departments could just subpoena tower information and get loads of information on people's cell phone use. And finally, the Supreme Court took up a case and said, you know, that much data, while normally a public information, it becomes a violation of your privacy because it almost tells you where you are at any exact moment. And I think in this day and age, especially with current decisions by the Supreme Court, which, you know, harm women, amongst other things, I think tracking information in this city is not a good thing. So just to be very clear, through the chair to the chief of police, I'd like to answer some of the questions some of the people up here had. First, this data will currently be retained for 30 days?
Yes, correct. That's the standard protocol, pretty much every agency in Michigan that does this type of system.
Mm-hmm. Are there any agencies so far that have asked for a difference? And I guess, could we ask for a different amount of time for data to be kept?
You can keep it for 1 day if you want, but the average is 30 days. Law enforcement purposes is 30 days for investigation. If you're spending this much money for the tool, have the tool be useful. No good looking back and you only having data for a couple days or a week when you need to see who was around this house or the scene 2 or 3 weeks ago for a buildup of suspect information. From a law enforcement end, the 30 days is a better tool.
It helps establish the dragnet.
Well, it's a better tool for us to solve a crime.
Okay. More than that, I know that in our confidential packet, which I don't want you to get into all the information about, there will be an auditing requirement. We're going to audit this system like it would be lean without the penalty, the criminal penalties. We can't impose those. The state would have to impose those, correct?
Yeah, 100%. There's actually 2 different auditing mechanisms. One of them is a monthly report that shows every single running of a plate. So it shows the plate and it shows the purpose and why the officer ran it. We get those on a monthly basis, and if we see something suspicious, like someone that works in a bureau that shouldn't be running plates, but all of a sudden he's running 10 or 12 plates, we're going to notice right away because it's going to show right on the monthly printouts. But then in our policy, our procedure, or general order, every single year, the chief of police is dictated per the general order to pull 10 random samplings of license plates that were run. And you're supposed to read why they ran the plate, the reason for it, and to make sure to verify that the information was correct, that the system was working properly, and the person running it was doing it legitimately. So it's in our policy as well.
I guess, I want you to keep going. I have a question for the city attorney, though, so I want you to stay right there. Through the chair to Mr. Koszubski, could we create a misdemeanor in Sterling Heights that running this data without a stated purpose would be a misdemeanor and have some kind of penalty?
Mr. Koszubski. That's a good question. I hadn't thought about that. I'd have to think about it.
Okay.
It's likely.
Likely, okay. So back to the chief. On top of all this, other cities would have access to our data. But if I'm understanding my packet correctly, they would have to ask us for access. And would it be, we're always going to give them our data, or would it be on an individualized basis? They have to give us the reason why they want access to our data for a stated amount of time, or?
Yes, that agency would have to ask to have access into our system. And right now, most cities are sharing. If you ask that agency, like in Rochester Hills, they have cameras already installed on Rochester Road. There's cameras on M59. Macomb County Sheriff, Oakland County Sheriff, they're deploying these. Warren, Shelby's going to be deploying them. They're literally everywhere.
Technological
And
beast.
the departments have talked and they've agreed to share the data. But when that department asks for Sterling Heights data, they are still required to ask why, case numbers, reasonings, it all has to be documented. And if we get that monthly report back that Warren was looking at our data and they didn't put a reason why, we can cut them off at any time.
Okay, so I guess, just to be very clear, we would approve them, I assume, access one time to our data.
Yes.
They would then have that access unless and if we cut them off.
That's correct.
But would they have to follow our policies that we're setting forth here about having an informational purpose? Or could they, if we gave them access, abuse our policies? I'm afraid that we're going to run into problems on the back end where we're going to realize that other cities are not going to be as particular as you and your command officers will be in Sterling Heights.
And if they don't, they lose access to our data.
We're gonna have them agree to that up front because.
Well, yeah, we can cut them off.
It's always
Yeah.
easier to grant, once you grant access, it's hard to take it away. That's my overall fear.
But it's really easy. We literally stop them.
But will we?
Well, we 100%. If they're just running a bunch of plates and there's no reasoning in the reason box of why you ran the plate, we're done with that. We're not, this is against our internal policy. We just wouldn't let it happen and that agency would lose access to it.
Okay. I think that I'd be more comfortable with individualized requests. I think that if a city wants to use the data on my citizens, that they should have to ask you or your command officer, I assume there's a designee for this type of stuff in the traffic bureau or wherever, that they should ask us what and why. And we should make a determination based on that rather than giving unlimited access to our database and our citizens to Sterling Heights, to Detroit, to Memphis, Georgia, Memphis, Tennessee, Atlanta, Georgia. I don't think they follow the same policies that we have, and they don't have the same standard for police that we have, and I'd be uncomfortable with them being able to see the data that we have on our citizens here. Because at the very end of it all, those of us up here, me included, we're the ones who have to protect the residents of Sterling Heights. We have to be their voice and their protection. So I have a problem with that. I know we talked on the phone, but I want to make this very clear. Would Immigration and Customs Enforcement have access to this data?
No, they would not.
Okay.
Yes, the representative from Flock would like.
Yeah, Councilman Radke,
Sure.
I just want to clarify, within the Flock system, you actually cannot conduct a search without a specific search reason. So that, there would only be searches based on cases, investigations in Flock.
Right, but you could give any
Right, I just wanted to clarify that
Yes.
it won't be, there will not be a search that doesn't have a reason for being
right.
conducted.
Whether the reason is verifiable and actual is my concern, not just that if they can search without a reason. So that's my concern.
Exactly, totally agree. That's why we've tried to proactively provide
Sure.
the audit report to your chief to be
Sure.
able to do that.
I also have concerns about the de-anonymized data, the idea that, because Google did this for years, where they release data and they say, well, you can't figure out who it was. And then people did. They started figuring out who certain people were based on their data, because there's people who are tech wizards that I'm not. I'm a Luddite, but there are people who are very good at this type of stuff who can show that how to do that. So I would be concerned. Again, at the end of the day, I do not think that the government needs surveillance tools to monitor law-abiding citizens in Sterling Heights. And then when they come to me and they say, oh, but we're only monitoring the criminals, well, but you have to monitor everybody. So the law-abiding and the criminals are being monitored, and we do not know what this data will be used for. In other countries, systems like this, I doubt this system because I don't think they're operating there, but systems like this are used to take activists off the street, to bundle them in the cars and to put them into detention. So the idea that it can't happen here, I watched the news with interest in January 6th, where a coup happened, where they attempted coup, tried to take over the government, and I think about what other people could do with this type of data. So I don't like the idea of creating databases of citizens that could then be used. I don't think you're going to use it for nefarious purpose. I know I'm not going to use it for nefarious purpose, but the idea is that we're just hoping people aren't going to use this for a nefarious purpose. So I have real concerns with this system. I am going to vote against it. I voted against the cameras in Dodge Park. I voted against other types of surveillance of our citizens. I trust the residents of Sterling Heights. We have one of the safest cities in the state for a reason. I do not think we need this. I think a bandwagon effect is happening where all these communities are rushing into this new digital gold rush because they think it's going to help them solve crimes. At the end of the day, legwork solves crimes, Chief. You know this as well as I do. So for me, I'm a firm no on this. I hope the other questions that were asked by the residents are answered. I might be the only no, but unlike other things, like Sterling Landings, one, I was the only council member to vote no, and I've been proven right over and over and over again. So I'll vote no on this, and I will sit and I will wait, and I'm sure, be proven right again. That's all I have, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Radke. Anyone else, council? Well, I'm going to take Mrs. Zarko. She made the motion.
Yes,
Okay.
please.
I guess I'm going to be looking at this a little differently because I think that by using this flock system, we are protecting the residents of the community. And we listen to how many times that lien system has been abused, but by the same token, how many times has it been used correctly where we don't count that, and it's thousands and thousands and thousands of times. And the background material tells us the other cities that are using this system right now. I guess, and some of the questions were, how do you access the information from one city to another? Well, if we have this here, Chief, what policy would you use to access, through the chair, to the chief, what policy would you have in place to access another city's information?
Chief.
We would have to ask permission from these other agencies that surround us for access to their system, and then we can query a plate. For us, if we want to know if something happened, we're looking for suspect vehicle information, it's a two-way street. We allow people into our data, but then when we have access to all of our surrounding communities, we know if that car that left that night is in Shelby at 21 in Shaner, we know because we have access to those surrounding communities. So we want access to those surrounding communities. So we benefit by having access, and they also benefit by having our access.
Okay, I'm going to use an example. I mean, the other day, it's 2:45 in the afternoon, I'm sitting in my family room, and I see two cars drag racing down Shaner, going north. Now, if there was a camera there, you'd probably get the license plates of those two cars. But you wouldn't do anything unless the cars were involved in an accident? Is that how this works?
Well, someone could make a reckless driving complaint that two cars almost cut me off. They were going 110 miles an hour. The police showed up. We couldn't catch up to the cars. Yeah, what a great use. We pull it up. There it is. There, we got the license plate. And we know, again, we would have to have a witness or someone to make a complaint or the law enforcement officer to be involved in this. But just a resident saying they're drag racing, it's going to be very difficult to prove that a crime was committed unless an officer was there or unless someone was willing to sign a complaint or saw something, or you were in your car, Ms. Sirico, and were cut off, or some reckless driving complaint. At least we have some place to go. And if you're willing to show up at court to testify, this guy cut me off, was doing 110 miles an hour, we now know the car that did it because we can pull up the flock data. There's the license plate. Then we can talk to the person registered to that car because there is still a question about who is driving the car. We know that this is the plate of the car, but a lot of times they're going to say, I wasn't driving it. So we still have to do old-fashioned police work, yes.
Okay. And it's my understanding the forfeiture funds are being used to pay for this system, correct?
That is correct, state forfeiture funds.
So money that we've gotten in the past from something illegal is actually going to help us in the future to do something that is going to help our residents.
That's correct.
All right. I guess my other question is it says here that we're going to have 22 cameras throughout the city. One, will residents know where those cameras are installed? And are there priority, like intersections or places that are on a list right now that you would want these particular the FLAC technology?
Yeah, we've been meeting with FLOC representatives about camera placement and talking with our detectives, our road patrol officers, about when we have crimes in Sterling Heights, which way do the bad guys go? They use major streets, they use Van Dyke, they use 16 Mile Road, they get to the borders of the city. And that's where we're gonna place those cameras, where we know people will flee from after a crime is committed. And so we're setting up those camera placements to get the biggest bang for the buck and the most returns. And as far as putting those camera placements out, I would say most communities, if I'm not mistaken, do not publicize where all the cameras are, because you don't want the bad guy to say, I'm just going to take these 3 streets so my plate never gets photographed. Probably not good practice. So we're not going to advertise where all of our cameras are at, but our policy and everything else, how FLOC is run, how many cameras we do have, our policy, the auditing process, all of that will be on our website, like I explained at the budget meeting.
I guess my next comment is really personal, and I think it's the world that we live in right now. If we can put another tool in the toolbox that's going to make it easier for law enforcement, as well as certainly we would hope that it's going to make it safer for our residents, I'm in favor of this. So I really have nothing further right now, but I think this is, it's worth the effort. And from what I understand, we're already using it over, Sterling Landings is using it. So there was a need there, and Mr. Gallo went and did it, and he's sharing the information with the police department. So we already know that it has been successful in a limited, amount of time. So nothing further right now. Thank you, Mayor Taylor.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Zarko. Anyone else, council? Mr. Yanez, yep, sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just for clarification, I'll ask the chief, through the chair to the chief, the annual recurring fee is $57,500. Is that also coming out of forfeiture funds?
Yes.
And I believe that the city council is in charge of spending those forfeiture funds. So therefore, if anybody has a problem with the city manager renewing the contract, we could always just unfund this during budget time, if we choose to. Chief, you wrote an SOG on
Yeah,
this?
by general order.
A general, you call them general orders?
the police department.
You haven't caught up to the fire department yet?
No,
We call them
no.
SOGs, okay.
Of course, you guys have an extra letter in the fire department.
Yes,
It
we
makes it
do.
sound more official.
Thank you, Chief. Did you copy that SOG, or, I'm sorry, what do you call it?
The general order.
General order, did you copy that off of
Yeah,
another department? that
and I'm not
already
sure,
has the
did
system?
the general order, did it come from FLOC, or was that an aggregate of other cities?
We shared examples from other cities that have gone through review processes with community activist groups and with their own council and developing their own documents. We share those as best practice with our customers, and then they adapt based on what works best for their communities.
Okay, and then you, Chief, you customized it, don't go away. You customized it.
Then we turned it into our format, and the general order is very thorough, goes through every single stage of how to operate, run, auditing, the whole thing's covered.
How many eyes in your department saw that before you released it?
We don't have the system yet, so we're not, my
No,
command staff, our detectives, we have a whole
You wrote
group of.
your order, and then other people reviewed it, right?
Yeah, our command staff put this together.
Your
The
command staff,
detectives that are working on this, and Josh Selby and Sergeant Finkbeiner, Detective Bureau, a bunch of guys have been working on this on the back end.
Okay, thank you. And I'm sorry, ma'am, I forgot your name.
Yes, no problem, Councilman Yanez. I'm Laura Holland.
Ms. Holland. Who's the first municipality to use your system, and how long have they had it?
Very first would have been in the Atlanta, Georgia area. I think some counties you might have heard of, Cobb County, Gwinnett County. But we've been operating since 2017. So we actually started as a neighborhood neighborhood provider. So we provided only to neighborhood associations and HOAs, and then ended up having law enforcement agencies contact us about using the technology. And so then we developed some additional privacy protections and policies to be put in place for selling to law enforcement.
And what does your company do with the data it collects?
Nothing. You own the data. You own your data. We're just a conduit by which you store it in a cloud server. So we help provide that cybersecurity protection of your cloud server as part of our agreement, but you own your data. We don't touch it. We don't sell it or share it.
And the 30 days, where did the 30 days come from?
Yeah, that's a best practice from our law enforcement advisors. So think about if you have your home burglarized and you're out on vacation for 2 to 3 weeks, it can take a long time for you to even know that that's happened. And so that's the best practice that our law enforcement recommended that we include.
And so your law enforcement agencies that have had this for a very long time, have they run into any problems of people accessing the information, misusing it, what have you?
Across the board, no. If they have, like Chief said, we provide that regular audit report and they find out about it immediately and take action. Your chief's policy outlines very clearly what action will be taken if the system is misused.
Do we have any statistics on how many crimes have been solved using the system?
Yes, so lots of case studies I'm happy to provide through the chief to get exact specific data. I think one of the things to mention is that we've actually seen this deter crimes in communities. So communities that have experienced a lot of violence or a lot of property crime over the first 12 to 18 months will actually see a significant decrease in those crimes in their community after implementing the flock system. So I think some good examples are Cobb County, San Bernardino, California. We can, of course, share those so I can get specifics. And just so you know, Councilman, we're actually participating in a study right now too, so we can be able to share that across the board, across lots of different types of communities, exactly how effective ALPR is.
And whoever wants to answer this can answer it. So you're just taking a photograph of a license plate. You gave us many examples of that. So unlike the lien system, if one of your officers is looking for a date, they can't use the block system to see who's driving the car, right?
That's correct. We would just have a picture of the plate with a GPS location.
I think that's, well, look, I'm going to editorialize here. I appreciate all those privacy concerns that my colleague and some from the audience have brought up, but I'm all about solving crime and creating safe cities, so I am going to support this as is. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Yanez. Council, anyone else? Mrs. Sarowski.
Thank you, Mayor Taylor. So, Chief, stay there for just a second, please, but this is actually to Ms. Holland. You had a phrase that caught my ear right from the very beginning, and I wrote it down. Principles of civil liberties. Could you share what those were? You said they were built into your practice or your practice practice. So could you share what those are and what those, you talk about those?
Absolutely. So a couple of things. I think when we have conversations about civil liberties, privacy is always mixed in there. So there's a few things that we've built into our system that I think help protect that from the get-go. First being our standard data retention policy, right? So most ALPR providers are going to keep your data for a long period of time, and they will actually own it. So you don't own the data. But by implementing within our contract terms that we will only store the data for a certain period of time and that you are the owners, that automatically relinquishes that possibility of us misusing that data. So that's the first piece. I think the second piece to mention is that we built into the system the reasons required for searches, and then proactively provide that to the chief or to our customer sheriff in a lot of cases. By doing that, we connect cases to actual criminal investigations. So try to make sure that there's no misuse of the system, that there's not people searching for reasons that they shouldn't be, because we want to make sure that our system is reflective of what the police department needs, but also the protections that we have built in place. I think another piece of that, right, is that you have to have training to be able to access the system. So this is not just like anybody in the department will be able to access it. The chief's policy also outlines the training required, and every customer trains their law enforcement officers who use it. And so there's all sorts of privacy and security built into how to actually use the system from a law enforcement standpoint.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. So Chief, through the chair to Chief, if I could please, so the chief, so are you training every single officer on this, or are there different levels of people who can access this?
Yeah, we'll end up training everybody. Either it's through a video system, roll call training, everyone will get the training and they'll know the policy. We have something called Power DMS at our police department. This policy goes, it's like a digital bulletin board. The officer has to read it, they have to digitally sign it, and we know if they didn't digitally sign it. And not only that, we also ask test questions, so they don't just click I agree.
Yeah.
Because everyone just clicks I agree and they don't read the
they do.
terms. So we make them now, we actually do little quizzes, and we will quiz them on some of the big things about misuse, auditing practices. Those we'll probably have 5 to 10 questions from this policy. So yes, probably everyone will be trained, and it's going to be standardized training across the board.
Okay, and then in your policies that you've mentioned, as far as your auditing, so you're auditing, you said you're going to, it's a monthly audit, so it's every 30 days.
The flock will send us a list of every single plate that was run on our system, and we
Okay,
can see
so
if there's
they
any.
actually, so Flock actually does the audit.
They send a monthly report,
It's just
yes.
an automatic audit.
Yeah, and then once a year, we will randomly pull 10 searches to see if anything is going on within our own staff.
Okay, and just really quickly, so explain to me that audit, it's already sorted, so that you can see how many, who's done more audit, it's already pre-sorted?
Yes,
you
yes,
can
so
see
it'll
that.
tell
Okay.
you who the individual was, what camera they actually searched, what network it's a
Okay,
part of,
perfect.
the timestamps, the investigative reasons.
Dates and timestamps and all of that, so you can do it at a quick glance to see who's done any maybe improper or at least a frequent flyer on your audit or your searches. Okay, very good. So, so I'm actually pretty comfortable with this. FYI, just for your purposes, my husband's a judge. He's used the lien system or has had comfort. I don't think he's used the lien system. He's very comfortable and has had a lot of exposure to the lien system. And so I know a little bit about it. And so I am comfortable with this. The lien system's been used for a long time. I don't think that this is actually going to do some of the things that some council people and residents have been concerned about with invasion of privacy to the extent that some fear. So I'm in favor of this. I want to see our city safe. I know that there's databases out there, more databases than we even know are out there on us. So I am in favor of this at this time. So thank you both. And thank you, Mayor. Nothing further.
Thank you, Ms. Zarowski. Mrs. Konski.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through the chair to the chief. Was this the only company that offers this service? Are there other companies, and how did you come across them?
Yeah, there are other companies, multiple companies that are doing license plate reader technology. This has been out for years, and in fact, during the budget meeting, if you remember, we had a pilot program here back in 2012. We had one car completely outfitted with a company called Federal Signal, I believe it was, back in the day, and they had their camera system, and it just was not robust enough. We only had 7 cars. The data was ridiculous. It went nowhere. Couldn't really check other areas because there's only 7 cars taking data, so that whole system just crashed. But there are many organizations doing license plate reader, and we went with Flock. Someone brought it up earlier about jumping on a bandwagon, or I purposely didn't jump on the bandwagon a couple of years ago when Flock came into town. Warren was getting the system, and I'm like, okay, I'm going to wait to see what happens. You're even approaching city management on this as a budget item. I waited, and I wanted to see what happened. I wanted to see how good the cameras were, what kind of success they had. Warren went live, big comparable city, and then several other agencies, Chesterfield being one of them, with really good success stories. So we have an entire sheet of stuff that happened just within the first 2 months, and stolen cars found, homicide suspects found, and the report was outstanding. They loved the technology, they loved the equipment, and we decided to go with Flock because by the time we got around to our budget and we kind of did a wait and see approach, so many agencies, everyone around us went with Flock. So for us to go with another vendor would make no sense, because now I would have to go to every city, and I'm on a totally different system than the other cities are on. So this makes total sense to go with Flock.
The contract that we would have with them is a 2-year contract with an option to renew for an additional 2 years. Is that correct?
Continuous.
I'm not sure on the terms. Is that, yeah, I think it's a
say-
year-to-year contract, if I'm not mistaken.
That's initial 2 years.
Yeah, it says initial 2 years?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I think the first year we pay about $3,000 more. I think it's for installation costs,
Mm-hmm.
right? And then it drops down to $57,000 in subsequent years. And I do like Flock's system too. the price, you're leasing the cameras. And at any time you're not happy with the cameras, the technology, or if the law changes, they say this is unconstitutional, or anything happens like that, we do this with our hands and we walk away. We don't own the equipment, it's done. If you spend $5,000 or $10,000 per camera, some other systems you have to buy the camera, you spend hundreds of thousands of dollars for this network of cameras, and all of a sudden it doesn't work, it fails, or the company goes bankrupt, or law changes, now you're stuck holding the bag for hundreds of thousands of dollars of upfront costs. So I kind of like this system, and the cameras are warranted and covered as well, so.
How does the system work? You say that it can be used for Amber Alerts, it can use for accidents, and so on. What does it actually do? It photographs just the license plate, cars, colors of the cars. In an accident, you have like a video.
Yeah, there's no video. There is a picture of the car, and I would say it's a infrared picture of the plate as well, I believe.
Yes, you can get it in the dark.
In the dark. So in total darkness, there's an infrared camera embedded with the color camera, so you can get that plate in total darkness at speeds of 100 miles per hour. So it's very accurate at what it does of capturing the plate on the back of a car. And then it stamps, and then hopefully with the sun out, with light, you can get a color on the vehicle as well, but also a GPS location of that car and that plate. And that's what we use it for. People suffering, we have elderly drivers that leave and they disappear, and family says they took off in the car 2 hours ago. Well, we can now search for that plate from grandma's car with not only our system, but the other 8 agencies that surround us. Was that plate seen? And immediately, yes, there's a hit at 23 in Gratiot. The car just went through the intersection. We can call the Macomb County Sheriff, Chesterfield, and say, hey, this car is in your area. This lady drove away. I think she's lost. But we've had Amber Alerts, parental kidnappings, homicide suspects, and we know it's a red, Dodge Charger in the area that fled, but we couldn't get the plate. So now if someone attempts, a homicide or a stabbing, the car fled. Now we can run for a red Dodge Charger everywhere around the site of location. Sure enough, there's a red Dodge Charger right there at the corner within a minute of our incident, and there's the plate on the car. And it comes back to a guy with 3 different outstanding warrants for arrest, a prior, conviction for assault with a deadly weapon. Wow, you have a good suspect. So that's what we'd use for in law enforcement.
So mainly is not only if you don't have the license plate number, you can go with the description of the car, and you can recreate an accident with this also?
No, that was the laser scanner. I think you got, that same night I did laser scanner. That's what you're probably, where you can recreate we do 3D scanning. That's a totally different technology. So this is more, just the car, the license plate and the location. And we can also, if we're looking for somebody, we can create a hot list. So I can put your plate ABC 123. You're missing. We don't know where you're at. We're worried about you. We can enter your plate into the system, and anyone that's got the flock camera system, which is a lot of agencies around us, it'll pop up on the officer's in-car computer that says, there's a beep, hey, there's a hit. This car is wanted by Sterling Heights. It's an elderly person that drove away suffering from dementia. That alert can go out to multiple departments. So we can enter plates that we're interested in into the system as well.
So this would help you in many ways.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay.
Mayor Taylor?
Mrs. Schmidt.
Thank you. I'll be very brief. When this was brought up during the budget process, I was in favor of it. I considered it another tool in our toolbox. I continue to have that same feeling. My one question is, when there are, you're on Van Dyke and it's bumper to bumper traffic or, heavy traffic, how does it respond to that situation?
Describe, yes. So the cameras are motion activated, and they actually take a series of about 7 seconds worth of footage. And then they will actually send the best picture to the cloud based on the single vehicle. So in that situation, right, you would bumper to bumper traffic, people are not moving, you would get pretty much the same picture over and over again, and the best one would be sent to the cloud. But if somebody's speeding past, it would be the best picture in a 7-second period.
But regular daily traffic on Van Dyke is going 50, 55 miles an hour, and you have, 100 cars. So how does it adjust for
Right.
multiple cars?
Excuse me, I think I misspoke. It's 7 pictures about on average, and then the best one gets picked. So if the car goes by at 50 miles per hour, it'll take about 7 pictures as
But
the
if
car
you
goes
have
by.
5 cars going by at 50 miles an hour at the
It'll-
same time?
It'll take pictures
Of all of them?
All of those, yes. And so the cameras cover about 2 lanes worth of traffic, and so it depends on where you end up placing them to cover the entire area.
Okay, I have nothing further.
Okay,
Mr. Mayor, I have one brief question.
go ahead, Mr. Radke.
Thank you. Through the chair to the chief. In the policies that we've set out, is there any type of crime that we list as being allowed to be used or not? Because what I've heard here is a lot of things. Some are not crimes, and we're still searching the license plate information. So I'm curious, should we limit this to felonies or misdemeanors? Because the idea that we can go searching through and it looks like it's going to pass, so it doesn't really matter what I have to say, but I'll say it anyways. If we're going to go searching through people's data, maybe we should have a justifiable crime to tie them to. Someone who drives off because, Granny's lost her mind or has Alzheimer's, that's not really a crime. And the idea that we're going to follow people around, well, maybe Granny was going to the market, maybe she was meeting her secret boyfriend, whatever she's doing. And the idea that we're going to use our data to track her down, that is the virtual panopticon writ large. That is the all-seeing machine following us around at all times. So in this state right now, where our county prosecutor says he's going to charge women for seeking out abortions if the stay is lifted in the current case, we have abortion clinics in Sterling Heights. You deal with them. I have real fears of this technology. That would be a felony under our state law. So since it's a felony, if the prosecutor requests it, we turn this data over to him. That's why I have a problem with this system. Because it can be used for good. It can be used for evil just as easily. We're making people safe, but maybe we're not making women safe who come into this town because they're going to be using our healthcare facilities. Maybe they're now afraid that the state's going to take an interest in them because our county prosecutor does not believe that women have reproductive freedom. So I have real concerns. That's, I guess, through the chair to the chief. Do we have any set of crimes or limits on how and what this data can be searched for and why?
Yeah, so if an elderly person did drive away, I would say in 99% of the times, the family would say, please do anything to find grandma. She is gone. This is unlike her. Been gone for hours. She suffers from a little bit of dementia. So what we do now, we put a BOL out to all area departments through Comtech that this red Dodge Charger is out there driving with an elderly person that suffering.
Granny likes some power.
So we do. I like the red Dodge Charger. So we put that out there right now. So we put it out and every single officer gets it on their screen that we're looking for this car. So now we're just going to be looking at license plate, like where is grandma's car? And that's what the family requested. And there is a real concern for her safety. We would do this we already do it now. We do it every other day. There's a call like this that goes out. Someone concerned about a loved one that's missing or they can't find them.
So I guess to me, I would argue that the crime should have to be a misdemeanor at least to search the system. That anything else is just crazy. The drag racing hypothetical that was brought up earlier scares the heck out of me. Because if there is no crime, we're now making up crimes. We're now saying, well, I think there might be a crime. If we can get somebody just to sign something, we now can search the system for whatever. And while I've called you about drag racing before. We've talked. I hate it. It drives me up the wall. So I get it. At the same time, I want to make sure that because we are building a database, and it's not just, I heard Mrs. Koski earlier say, this database says how many times your car has passed a certain area. And Mr. Yanez says, well, it really won't tell you. But the aspect of the system is, if you pass a pole every day, you can recreate someone's route to and from work, to and from their lover's house, to and from their secret girlfriend, to and from wherever, to and from their doctor. Maybe they're hiding a medical condition. So that's where I have fears. Because now we're recreating routes. We're telling people, yes, in a parking lot, a guy can run a plate. He'll run a plate. Trust me. We had an officer here who was fired for doing this illegal thing. When we have one of the best police forces in the state, and we still had an officer get fired for being an idiot. And, this just gives you one more tool in the toolbox. I don't disagree about that. But it's one more way to invade people's privacy. And I won't stand for it. That's all I have, Mr. Mayor. Thank you for the opportunity to speak one more time.
Okay, thank you, Mike, Mr. Radke, sorry. Yeah, this is a tough one, it really is. I see a lot of the benefits here, I see a lot of potential problems. I think humans are very good at taking something that is good surveillance. It's a good police practice. I don't think anyone disputes that. This is nothing more than police surveillance on a much greater level. So if police surveillance of the bad guys is good, then doing a lot of it should be better. But as we know, whenever we take something and we make more and more and more of it, it doesn't always turn out to result the way we want it to. I'm curious to review the data that you have on crime reduction. Because another thing is, it just seems like if you look back 10 years, 20 years, 50 years, and 100 years, the amount of technology that the police department has now than just say 30 years ago, Chief. I mean, you would say we're in a completely different world, right? Like,
Yeah,
it's
because of
complete-
cell phones in general.
The
We all
technology-
have a tracker on us 24/7.
Right,
I
so-
do. Someone can get my data. I'm
Yeah,
sure
so the
a good hacker-
technology that the police department has right now to fight crime compared to what you had 30 years ago or 50 years ago, there's no comparison, but it hasn't solved crime. And I'm not sure that the flock system is going to either. I hope it reduces it. I hope it helps. I hope it finds, it finds those missing children when an Amber Alert goes out. Let me ask, I guess, flesh it out a little bit. So when you have a car or a license plate that is suspected that a vehicle's been stolen, okay, and the report comes in, or a kid's been kidnapped and mom's knows it was her ex-husband or boyfriend or whatever and knows what make, model, and license plate. That goes into a database that's not Sterling Heights specific. Does it go into a flock database, or does it go into this, I read it somewhere in here, this hot list?
NCIC.
NCIC. Okay.
Hot list, that's for stolen cars, stolen plates get entered into there. And I believe your system would, if you want to flesh that out more.
Yes, so that's for Amber Alerts or missing persons. It's the NMEC, National Missing and Exploited Children Database. And so those are run outside of Flock. We get updates from those systems about those tags and vehicles, and we include them in our updates to our customers.
And I think all flock customers would have that updated database of stolen vehicle plates and wanted.
Yes.
How quickly does that populate?
It updates very regularly, so multiple times per day. I believe, excuse me, I might call on my colleague. We might have a bit more specific information about the number of times that it updates, but it's at least twice a day for NCIC. Every 6 hours? Yeah, about every 6 hours. And there's some delay because I think their system is a little bit slower than ours.
Okay. Is there a reason why that can't be more? I mean, why can't it be every minute or something?
Right, it's on the NCIC system, right? So the national database doesn't update as frequently. We actually.
Who runs that?
The federal government runs it, Department of Justice. So we actually pull from their data more often than they run updates.
Okay. How do we get them to?
I definitely think we can contact our representatives about updating it more often, but it is very accurate. We don't see a lot of people who have active warrants out that no longer have a warrant and they're still on NCIC.
Yeah, I mean, I just don't understand. I mean, I'm like Mr. Radke said, I'm kind of a Luddite when it comes to technological things, but I think okay, you typed something in.
Right.
There's a missing child. We're going to type in this into our system, and then wait 6 hours for it to update?
Right.
Like, why doesn't it just update right away? And then
Right.
why don't you pull that right away?
So I think there's two different ways the system works, and I want to make sure that we know there's two distinct purposes, right? Because I think we're having conversations about both. That's the proactive feature, right? Where your chief will get lists from other nationally reputable sources, and that will provide him with data about people who are missing, people who are endangered, people who have active warrants out. That's the proactive feature. And then there's also the investigative feature, where there are crimes that occur in Sterling Heights, like the unfortunate murder that happened, like a hit and run, and your police can search the data that you've collected within your system about those crimes. So those are two different ways that things are happening, and we're updating our pictures constantly, right? So the data that you have on your community is a constant update.
Yeah. Okay, so let's talk about that. So you get because I read it in one of the memos from back in October of last year. Retail fraud, or it could be really any crime, where you've got a description of the vehicle but you don't have the license plate. So somebody says, I'm at Utica and Dodge Park, and a black Ram 1500 just crashed into me, or they came up, carjacked me, stole my wallet, whatever, okay? But I didn't get the license plate. So you start running the flock system for black Ram 1500s, and you pull me over because I'm driving right through that area.
So I think.
I mean, does that description give you probable cause to pull somebody over? And if not, then what good is it really doing if you don't have the license plate?
Right, and Chief, I'll start and then let you finish, because you deal with probable cause on a daily basis. I think what Flock provides is additional data that your police department wouldn't have without the system. So if you think about that situation, right, so you see somebody that does a hit and run, and you know it's a black, what did you say, Dodge?
Ram. Yeah.
Dodge Ram. There's a black Dodge Ram. Otherwise, your police department wouldn't know where to search, right? There would be no other indicators. You didn't get the tag. You don't know if there's any kind of custom bumper stickers or custom tires. There's no other data for them to go on. And so they can't pull over every single black Dodge Ram.
Well, in Michigan, they couldn't, because there's probably 1,500 of them in
Exactly.
any corner anyway.
But
I guess my point is, like,
right, I promise I'm getting to the point. So what Flock does is it actually provides a picture to give your police officers more evidence than just the black Dodge Ram that was the eyewitness account. So it's a corroboration of the eyewitness account. So they can see, okay, in this parking lot, there was a black Dodge Ram that also had custom tires or custom rims, or maybe a really large muffler. And then that's an additional investigative piece for them to further find a suspect.
So you said that, I guess I'm curious of how exactly the tech works, because, so you're saying it's scanning, it's taking multiple pictures, it's some algorithm is deciding which image is best to send to the cloud. Do the rest just get wiped automatically?
Cleared.
Okay. And so there are instances where the system is sending images to the cloud that do not include the license? I mean, are they taking pictures of the side? Like,
It's taking a picture of the back of the car, so as it's going past. And we specifically say taking pictures of the back of the car because there's more features that are important, right? It's those additional details, like what color it is, if it even has a plate. I know where I'm from, we have a lot of issues of people removing their plates before they commit crimes. We have a lot of paper plates. And so this system is not just a reader. It takes a picture so that you have that data in order to then put together additional investigative pieces and determine probable cause.
Okay.
Chief, I don't
So
know
how
if
does
you're
it, Chief, so Chief, then I guess, how do you make that decision? How do you make that call?
Yeah, it does become probable cause that now there's a black Dodge Ram, and she says there was some kind of bumper sticker on the back, and then we have a flock camera hit right in that general area of your car with this sticker, this bumper sticker, and it has a plate. And now what we do is old-fashioned police work. We'd show up at your house and say, hey, listen, were you at the corner of Dodge Park and Utica Road? And I just noticed fresh damage to the front of your car. Were you in an accident? Then we go old school. Why were you there? We have a picture of your car in that area. You have fresh damage. So what we do with any traffic follow-up or investigation. But if we didn't have the pictures, we'd have no clue what car was there. It just wouldn't exist. That person would just get away scot-free.
I hope you guys are a little bit better at investigating than just letting them get
All
away.
right, Mike,
Yeah.
I've got the floor. Okay, I think this is one of the harder decisions that I've had to make in recent memory, because I don't really know if we've crossed the Rubicon already or if this is taking us there. I really don't know. It's hard. This is really a difficult one. The benefits are numerous. The technology, though, is problematic in many ways, in my opinion. But I just don't, I hate to say this out loud, but it's already out there. Other communities are doing it. I'm already being subjected to it. If Sterling Heights draws a line in the sand, is that going to stop this? If there are abuses, I don't know. I don't think so. It's sort of like those tax certificates that Joe Judnick, or tax exemptions that Joe Judnick, God rest his soul, used to complain about all the time. In many ways, he was right, but what other option do we have? I'm going to vote yes on this. I'm going to monitor it. Looking forward to seeing the data from it. I'm hoping that, that the results are there and that we're able to use it proactively, that we're able to respond to crimes. And, Chief, I'm going to ask you on a personal level to use an abundance of caution in how this is implemented and deployed. Train our police officers, expect and demand the best out of them, and be on guard for abuses. And please be proactive in notifying the city council and city administration if there are abuses here. Because as Mr. Radke said, we already have a very safe community. If this is a tool that's going to make our community even safer and help our public have a better sense of security here, then I want to see that, but I'm very concerned about the potential for abuse. So, all right, anybody have anything final they want to say?
Mr. Mayor,
Yeah, Mr. Yanis.
just a couple more things. Through the chair to the chief. Chief, the Comtech county facility, does their electronic surveillance equipment record anything, or are they just traffic cameras?
The cameras at the intersections do record, some of them record as far as what happens at the intersection. We've used that data in the past for fleeing suspects and for crash accident scenes to get that data, but not all cameras record, and sometimes it's difficult to get that footage. But yes, the county does have cameras at intersections that does record.
And
But it doesn't do license plate reader, it just does video.
Sure, but can you take a snippet or a still shot of some video that's recorded and enlarge it? Can you see somebody's face?
In the
their car?
movies, what, in
I
the
know,
Comtech, you
in the
mean?
movie- No, don't go there with me.
Okay, no, but I know what you're saying. So on a video, they always, it cracks me up. They zoom in and they can get the plate. They never works, right? Because the video gets so grainy. I wish it was. I wish we had this technology on CSI where they zoom in, they hits the enhance button, and then the plate comes into focus. I wish to God that was, because you know how many times we've had video for business owners that have video systems on their buildings? They go, I have video of it. And the camera's only 20, 30 feet away. You zoom in, can't read the plate. And it's so frustrating. This camera technology uses that infrared camera embedded with a color camera, and it specifically, I know this because I did the last system. I saw the data, I saw the plates that come back kind of like black and white, and they're razor sharp, even in total blackness. The camera's designed to get numbers on that plate. That's what they're designed for.
Yeah, so I was.
Yeah, no facial recognition,
Yeah,
yes.
I was just, the road I'm going down here is, are we already being monitored?
Yeah.
And I think
Every
we are.
intersection is, yeah.
Absolutely, we're already being monitored. The other thing, I just, because I'm curious about this thing about following people around. I mean, if I give you a license plate, ABC 123, is somebody really going to sit there and go, okay, they were, I'm looking up ABC 123, they were at 14 and Shaner, and now I'm going to track them all through. Can somebody actually do that without purpose?
Yeah, that would be very, very difficult. We don't have enough cameras to track. We just put them at the areas that we think people are going to run to. So to have a dragnet across the city would be almost impossible. And on the paperwork, we would have that monthly audit showing this person running the same plate over and over again. It would be like, that would be the dumbest thing ever. You'd instantly be found out, and that's
So
the
you
policy.
wouldn't be able to know that I'm secretly going to Weight Watchers twice a week?
No, but if you want to confess something.
Obviously, I haven't, but I just, okay. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I appreciate the indulgence.
Okay, anyone else? I was actually assaulted today, and I could provide a license.
It looks like you were assaulted.
By a rabbit
I was assaulted. The suspect is a white male, late 30s, wearing a dark suit, black tie,
Great hair.
white shirt. And it was, I mean, I guess, you can't arrest me for hurting myself.
And he drives a black Ram.
Yeah, it was a black Ram. It was the black Ram right out in that parking lot. I did have another question. So Mr. Yanna's comment made me think of it. Are there guidelines and parameters for what would make the Sterling Heights Police Department put a license plate into the system to begin, to allow it to be tracked? Like where do we
Yeah, it
Where do
would-
we draw the line?
An investigative lead, a detective looking for information on this plate, like this suspect car or this vehicle, we're looking for this type of car, is wanted in this crime, it would have to be a purpose stated in that hot list when you put it in there, why you're putting that plate in there. You can't just say because it's my ex-wife and I want to know where she's hanging out. Like it'd have to be related to an actual case that we're investigating, a crime. I got hundreds of different crimes, what the detective is looking for. So there's really we don't have a list of every crime. If the detective is looking for the car and they think that the flock system can help them find that car, find out who's driving in that area for suspect information, we're gonna put it on the hot list.
Okay. All right. Council, with no further discussion, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Mr. Mayor, briefly, could I ask for a roll call vote?
Yeah, we can have a roll call vote. Ms. Riska, a roll call vote, please.
Mrs. Schmidt?
Yes.
Mrs. Sarowski?
Yes.
Mayor Taylor?
Yes.
Mr. Yanas?
Yes.
Mrs. Yarko?
Yes.
Mrs. Kosky?
Yes.
Mr. Rick?
No.
Okay, motion carries 6-1. Thank you for coming and answering our questions. We appreciate it. Safe travels back to Atlanta. Thank you, Chief, for staying late.
You're not on overtime, are you?
And we will, he's on salary, right?
Oh, okay, it's because you need to leave if you aren't.
No OT for you.
Okay, we will move on to communications from citizens. Is there anyone in the audience who'd like to speak on any item not on tonight's agenda? We'll start with you, Mr. Nelson.
I left something up here last time. Ken Nelson, Fire Steel Drive. Like to bring up another, what I know Mr. Vanderpool always likes to hear, what I believe to be a little bit of a transparency issue. I have here the approved minutes of the July 13th Corridor Improvement Authority. A lot of this was all for July 13th was master plan leaves no part of the North Van Dyke corridor. This all has to do with the Van Dyke corridor. Additional plan envisions a more pedestrian-friendly Van Dyke roadway, including bike lanes, on-street parking, increased crosswalks, additional pedestrian connections, and enhancements that encourage walkability, and additional well-connected green spaces. Where is Sterling Heights at? The example that this company, that design workshop that's going to do zoning, there was an example in here for Buda, Texas. Now, I'm sure they can walk and they can ride their bikes a lot more of the year than we can. Buda, Texas. I also see that this Corridor Improvement Authority must meet on about an every 6-month basis or an as-needed basis. I see meeting minutes for December 10th. Meeting was called to order at 8:08 a.m. The meeting was adjourned at 8:12 a.m. They're better than you guys. 8:08, 4-minute meeting, okay? This also is at 8 o'clock in the morning. The July 13th meeting, which they had to go through and consider approval of a design workshop proposal. They had to recommend the board allocate $100,000 in CIA 2022-23 budget for other charges and $500,000 for property acquisition. Are we in the business of buying property for this now? Don't you think the public there ought to be some points where you bring that to the public and say, this is what we're doing?
I can help you.
Siri.
Was that
Excuse
Google?
me, it was my,
Siri.
Alexa?
she was responding to you.
Okay, but anyway, that's enough of that one. But I sure would like to hear about, Mr. McLeod said that the master plan is basically finished for the 1.5 miles from 18 and a half to Hall Road. It's basically finished. don't you guys get to look at this to see if you want to continue on that journey? Do all the property owners that own property between 18 and a half and Hall Road, have they bought into this thing that you're trying to do? I don't think so. My last item is that the marijuana, what was that? Forum that we had the other night. It was a waste of time. It was a waste of my time. It was a waste of the other people that went to speak. Forum indicates two-way communication. We didn't get any. Becky Davenport, who was running the meeting, comes up and tells us, okay, who wants to be the first to speak? That's the way the whole thing went. There was no information that was provided to that group that was there. So that was a waste of time, and if you want to do that type of thing for this,
Okay, Mr. Nelson.
I
Thank you.
understand.
Anyone else? Ms. Wright?
Hello again. I recently got my first month water bill since the switchover, and our usage was double what it normally is, which was obviously a surprise. So I called DPW, and we think, turns out, there's probably a leak in our sprinkler system causing about 1 unit every day to be used. Yeah, a lot. But my question was just, when do we anticipate the website to be completed? If it was up and running and I was able to track the water usage like we will eventually be able to, we probably could have caught this before, all of this money was spent and a leak. Also, if you'll indulge me in a minute, I didn't know the tree discussion was going to go into the residential side. And so I do want to just make a statement about residential trees. I know other states and cities, what they do is they use the money in their tree fund and they actually allow homeowners to get free trees on their property, not street trees, but, actually residential trees. And I think maybe instead of limiting us and forcing us to keep trees that we don't want, we can provide ways to have other residents who do want to increase the number of trees on their property to do so. Because as a resident, I really don't want someone telling me I can't cut down the trees that are in my yard. But if you say, hey, we'll give you, $500 towards a tree, I'm sure there are a lot of people in the city who would take up the chance to get a free tree on their property. So just a suggestion. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Wright. Anyone else under communications from citizens? Yes, sir?
Good evening. Good evening, Scott Townsend. Sterling Heights resident, lived here for 45 years or more, actually more than 45 years. Grew up in the south side and now reside in the north side. Wanted to share a couple things. We've really been a happy resident of this area. Our family's grown up here. We appreciate the work that the Parks and Recs have done with the skating rink and all the other things that have been done over the years. Police and fire have been great. We've had, unfortunately, not too many interactions with them, but they've been great all the time we needed them. And also appreciate the funding that the Uptown House has gotten over the years. It's a great piece of history in our area that's not, be around for a long time. I have heard for many years this area being the city talking about innovative living as well as it being a safe city. And based on some recent events, I've never spoken to this group before, but based on some recent events, I felt it was necessary for me to come and share my perspective. First of all, I'd like to say from an innovative perspective, I went to prepare for this meeting, went onto the city site and looked up the board packet or the packet that you receive. The fact that it's just one long PDF with no level of really a functional table of contents. I can't believe that you all do that. I know you're compensated, but it seems like an immensely inefficient process. Hire a few interns, just make it more effective. Very difficult as a resident to go through it. The amount of wet signatures that you require, and I don't know all the requirements, but as a potential business owner or somebody doing work in the city, to see all of these documents that are flying around, and then you scan them into this big 800-page, 300-page, whatever it is, packet it's not a very innovative, I think, and think something that could be improved. More importantly, what I want to talk about is the water issue that happened. I am shocked that I did not hear anything from the city about that at all. I hear the tests that go on Saturdays about the whole system. Didn't hear anything about it. We were literally going to websites of newspapers or whoever to find out, was our water safe or not? Went to businesses, they didn't know. It was on a weekend, so I figured, well, I'll go on the site on Monday. I'll go on the Sterling Heights website in the morning on Monday, and then maybe there'll be something about it to direct us to a certain spot. Nothing. I hear about safety for the last hour and a half. Nothing about the water. That's not a fire issue. That's not a police issue. That's leadership issue. Very upsetting. There's more to leadership than riding the trolley up and down Dodge Park or hanging out backstage with Uncle Cracker. I expect more out of this group than we've received. If you're tired and bored doing this, then move on and let somebody else that is engaged and really cares about the city and its residents more than many of you have shown me over the last few days. And I still don't know where we're at with the water. Extremely frustrating. Thank you.
All right, thank you, sir. Anyone else under communications from citizens? If not, we'll go on to reports from city administration. Mr. Vanderpool, on that note, I do know that our social media accounts were updated within close proximity to the time that the media reports were going out regarding the water. I believe we had updates at least on our Facebook page and our Twitter account. I know I checked the city's website, and I'm not sure how you missed it, sir, but there was a banner. I think that went up Saturday afternoon. There was a banner on the top, a red emergency banner that said that the GLWA had issued a boil water advisory as of whatever time for the city of Sterling Heights. There's, I believe, a link showing what other communities. It was updated around 3 p.m., was it Saturday?
Saturday.
That Sterling Heights did not have a boil water advisory, and that was listed right on the website. It was a top banner on the website. And do you know how long that, I guess my first question is, do you know when that banner appeared on the website?
Mayor, I don't know the exact time the banner appeared, but it was Saturday. And you are correct. Our social media outlets were all updated as quickly as we were receiving the information. And our listservs were all updated too. And that goes out to over 40,000 people instantaneously. So I encourage Mr. Townsend to sign up for our emergency alerts on our website, and you'll be notified of these types of activities via text and email instantly. And that includes any emergency alerts, snow emergencies, construction updates, and so on and so forth. So again, we did notify the community as soon as we got word from the Great Lakes Water Authority on Saturday morning, and then it was broadcast widely in the media that a boil alert was in place for all Great Lakes Water Authority communities in the map that we posted on our social media. So it was basically including Sterling Heights and North, so it wouldn't have been Warren and some others, but we included a very useful map with a legend that included the communities that were under the boil alert. And that was all updated, as you mentioned, Mayor, around 3:30-ish on Saturday, that we had been, the boil alert had been lifted for the city of Sterling Heights, that the water was safe, that we had tested our water. Great Lakes Water Authority tested the water. There was no cause for concern. We had not lost any water pressure whatsoever. We were out throughout the day on Saturday confirming all of that. So even if the Great Lakes Water Authority had not lifted the no boil alert for us, we had already petitioned them to remove us from the boil alert because there was no reason to include us at that point. So I think we did a reasonably good job of alerting the community. This is the first complaint that I've received or heard from the community regarding the issue on Saturday. So we do the best we can to communicate with the community. And I might also add, it was widely covered throughout the media, on all the major media outlets throughout the day on Saturday, Saturday night into Sunday, and continuing this week as well. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Vanderpool. So, you know, the city council was provided an update on Saturday at 10:51 a.m. and around 11:20 when it went on the city's Facebook page. Do you know when did you personally become aware of it? Do you know?
Within a matter of maybe 15, 20 minutes before we alerted city council and began informing the community. Obviously, it takes a little bit of time to confirm the messaging that's required, make sure that we're in lockstep with the Great Lakes Water Authority. So the protocol was first, I was made aware of it. I had discussions with our DPW director and then our community relations director. We pulled our team together and we immediately began preparing the public alerts after notifying city council pursuant to our protocol. So that all happened very quickly, and then we're monitoring it throughout the day. You know, hourly we were monitoring it. I was on the phone Saturday checking in with our testing throughout the community, so on and so forth. And then at 3:30, as soon as we got word that we could remove ourselves from the boil alert or that Sterling Heights would be removed, we immediately updated city council and then began updating through all our various outlets.
Okay, and so it was covered on social media. I saw that the e-news alerts that people can sign up for on the Sterling Heights website. If you go to the city's website, sir, there's 3 or 4 main categories, and you know, it's like pay a water bill. There's sign up for e-news alerts. It should be easy to find. Do you know how soon after the city got word of this from GLWA that an e-news alert went out to our subscribers?
Mayor, that's a good question. I got mine within an hour or so. I mean, it happened pretty quickly. Once the messaging is prepared, it goes out to the outlets very quickly. There was one delay that I'm aware of, and that was on our cable channels. The technology there is a little bit antiquated compared to social media, so it took us a little bit of time to get our cable channel, municipal channels updated, but those two were updated with a banner scrolling across the top.
Well, God help those who were watching the Sterling Heights cable channel at 11 a.m. on Saturday. Luckily, I don't think we had too many people. In all seriousness, though, I was asked by somebody on social media, why couldn't we use the emergency broadcast system that we test every Saturday, first Saturday of the month at 1 p.m.? Do we have, what would have stopped us from alerting with that method?
Mayor, in our case, the Emergency Operations Center was not activated. The county had not activated their Emergency Operations Center yet. There was no imminent danger. Our water pressures were very solid. The boil alert, as the Great Lakes Water Authority said in all their messaging, which we included, was a precautionary measure. There was no imminent danger to the general public, and the boil alert was precautionary, and those who were concerned and followed the boil alert were assured to have safe water. So for that reason, setting off the alarms, the sirens with voiceovers and so on, you know, has a tendency to cause a panic, and so we only want to reserve that for the most severe, life-threatening situations, tornadoes, you know, and the like, and so on.
Okay. Thank you. Look, sir, I appreciate you coming here, and I thank you. And it's look, you have every right to express your frustration. I'm not sure why you didn't see the alerts that went out. There were multiple redundancies, and I think we did about as good a job as any other community in alerting its residents. If there's more we can do, I appreciate, listen, look, I appreciate somebody coming and saying, this is what I think you could have done differently, and I wish you'd have done it differently. what I don't really appreciate is you coming up here and telling the seven of us, you can tell it to me, I guess, you can tell it to any one of us, but we don't do this job so we can go backstage with Uncle Cracker, okay? That's not what this is about. It's fair of you to criticize, and it's fair of me to respond, okay? But we don't make a whole lot of money, we don't get a whole lot of fame, we don't get a whole lot of celebrity, we don't get a whole lot out of this job except for the feeling inside of doing something that benefits the community. And as much as some of us disagree with each other and all that, I can tell you, I've worked with these people on this council and the folks sitting next to me and the administrators for a very long time. And every one of us works our butt off to do what is best for the residents time and time again. There's not a damn person on this city council that would say, I don't care that it's Saturday morning and there's a boil water advisory. I'm going to sit in my bed or I'm going to watch the tube. I'm going to do what I please. Every one of us was doing what we could to make sure that the community was alerted and that everybody who needed this message got the message, okay? And I can promise you that whenever a problem like this arises, that the seven of us have the same singular focus on doing what is in the best interest of the residents. Now, it's fair for you to say, you didn't do it good enough, you missed the mark, you got to do better next time. I like that criticism, I appreciate that criticism, because it does help us to sharpen our tools and do better next time. But again, I think it's unfair to claim that any one of us is just too lazy or doesn't care about the safety and health of our residents. Mr. Vanderpool, do you have any other reports?
Mayor, I just want to comment on Mr. Nelson. He mentioned that the North Van Dyke Master Plan hasn't been talked about publicly. It has been widely publicized. We spent a good year we had numerous public hearings on this. In addition, we talked about this at the forums that we held for the American Recovery Program funding that the city received. And I believe Mr. Nelson was there, wherein we talked about the North Van Dyke project and the master plan and so on. So I think that project, we've not only talked about it publicly, but it's been the topic of discussion during the budget hearings and its strategic planning and numerous community events. So yes, we talked about it at a presentation recently as well. The consultant was here presenting before City Council. So I'm not sure what more we can do on the North Van Dyke Master Plan, but we're going to continue to do all that we can to talk about and champion it and, most importantly, execute it.
Thank you, Mr. Vanderpool. Mr. Koszubski, anything tonight?
Nothing tonight, Mayor.
Council, any reports or new business? Mrs. Sarowski.
Mayor Taylor, thank you. So I do have a request. I have an ask, and it was brought to me by a representative of the Ukrainian Cultural Society. So without objection, I would like to, without objection from council, I would like to ask the city management to fly the Ukrainian flag next week and light the halo with the Ukrainian national colors for the week of August 21st through the 27th in honor of the Ukrainian Independence Day, which is next week, the 24th. So I'm asking for this as a sign of solidarity with all of our Ukrainian friends who, as we know right now, are in a fight for the continued independence and freedom. And so I would ask that and without objection, please.
Hearing none, Mr. Vanderpool, you have direction.
We sure do. Thank you, Mayor.
And I thank you all for that. And I do have nothing else at this time, but I will be out of town next week, so I wish you all a great week. And I will be enjoying Mackinac Island on your behalf.
Okay, very good. I enjoyed it last week.
Yeah.
Anyone else?
Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Radke.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just briefly, a couple things. One, your comments earlier are well taken, and I thought a lot about when COVID-19 first swept the state and the country. You know, we were meeting every day, twice a day, this entire council and the city administration and all the employees trying to chart a path forward. And we definitely didn't do that for the money or the time. I remember meeting after meeting, 3-hour meetings that I give a credit to this council and this body because we worked hard to make sure that our residents were both protected and that business could still be conducted in the city. So that just came to mind while I was thinking about that. Even further, thinking about the Corridor Improvement Authority, I take some of what Mr. Nelson says to heart. You know, the Quarter Improvement Authority has a big budget and has a lot of authority. And maybe we should do more to make sure that their meetings are publicized and attended by other people. But I do not take that this North Van Dyke project, which we've won awards for, we won an award. You went and got it drafted by a mayor's association because of the planning involved. We've been going over this for years. I attended a public hearing involving it, and the mayor of Utica at the time, he was there too. So we have been very proactive with involving business owners, our fellow residents, residents of Utica who were also at the meeting. Both him and Gus Calendrino, the current mayor, were at that meeting. I talked with both of them. So we worked very proactively. I think some of the distress is that some parts of the city might change a little bit. I think Mr. Gallo hit it on the head earlier. Change scares people until they realize what we're up to. The building across the street from Lakeside is a change, but once I think people grasp what we're up to, it'll make sense. North Van Dyke is going to be a change, but I think that it's on the right track. With the Chaldean Community Foundation and a lot of development, I think it's going to go from an underutilized industrial corridor that's basically worthless to a downtown pedestrian district which people are going to be happy to live in. I see this already happening on Auburn Road in Rochester Hills with the improvements they've made to the roadway there and the public amenities that they've added. I think it's a real opportunity for our city to rethink. You know, at the end of the day, this is going to be a single-family community. You're not going to change the people who live here already, the houses that they have. But we can offer something, an underutilized land that's right now, Riverland is a big empty vacant lot. You know, there's a lot of shopping centers there that don't have any customers or businesses. We can offer other opportunities to new and future residents, or even residents here right now who want to live in a bit of a different environment. We can offer them that. That's not degrading or subtracting from what we already have. It's just adding to it. To go from that, you know, the marijuana forum, I can understand how it, you know, it's more of a feedback session because city council was not involved. We're trying to hear what people's viewpoints on this planning that we're doing would be. But I can understand how people could maybe misunderstand the purpose of it. So in our planning, let's think about how we can better focus these instances because, you know, in the book by Strongtown's Confessions of a Recovering Engineer, he talks a lot about meetings that leave no one happy. The people who come to the meeting feel like their viewpoint wasn't heard or respected. Council or the body holding the meeting says that we're having this meeting for feedback, but they already kind of have a plan, so people feel like, oh, they didn't listen to me. We need to make sure that our meetings with the residents are proactive and involve sharing so that they can feel that they both have an input and that they are heard, and we can also plan better. Now, having a meeting about a roadway or a project, I always think is silly because people will come in here with their viewpoints and often they're wrong. They'll say, oh, this is going to add 100 cars of traffic to Hall Road. Well, Hall Road is designed to take hundreds of thousands of cars every hour. So 100 cars is a drop in the bucket, doesn't make a difference, but people will bring that forward as if it means something. That's a mismatch of intent and purpose. People don't understand the purpose of the meeting, and as policymakers, we're not showing them what we need them to talk about. So I don't have an answer for that, but it's something to think about. With that, that's all I have, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Radke. Council, anyone else?
Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Yanos.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. First of all, I want to say I really appreciate the robust discussions we've had tonight in the city council on trees and the privacy issue specifically. Talk about, you know, trying to do a good job for our citizens. I think this is an exemplary meeting tonight on just that. I do want to, I wasn't going to say anything, but, you know, Ms. Compton being here tonight sort of sparked this thought that I had. You know, for the last several months now, we've had several projects been brought to us for apartment complexes. And we had some input tonight about, you know, maybe the Gallo project, there will be a second apartment complex. You know, I talked to the developer from the Wedge after they withdrew their project, and because I wanted some feedback on how the process went, you know, his work with the city. I try to reach out to these folks to see if their experience with the city was a good one. And he was very upset. And I, you know, he lost his project that he put a lot of money into. It wasn't that that upset him. What upset him was someone used the term demographic shift. Demographic shift. And when that term was used, I knew exactly what people were talking about. All right? And that just goes back to what Sterling Heights used to be known for. And I don't have to use the words. But so this is the impression that people have when it comes to apartment complexes, that people of a lower standard, of a lower grade, ne'er-do-wells, those type of people are the only people that live in apartment complexes. And I'm listening to the chief, you know, go through everything that Mrs. Compton has dealt with in her only, you know, 7 months of time here in Sterling Heights, and it made me sort of reflect my 18 years and all the 911 calls I went on, and the vast majority of those calls, personal, crime-related, what have you, the vast majority were in residential properties, residential homes. Our city is built out to the most part. We're making some changes. You know, I read a book about cities and it says, you know, when you can't go out, you go up. I'm very frustrated that this stigma over apartment complexes exists and it's not going away. And I know that I will, and I'm certain that the rest of this council will do everything possible to make sure that we have nothing but good projects in here. But Mr. Mayor, like you said several weeks ago, people deserve good housing, and they deserve to live in a good community with good schools and nice parks. And some people are just not going to be able to afford a house. Apartment's going to be their first, their first, or maybe their only option. And, you know, I want good people moving here and being part of our city. And being part of our city means being a part of the city, whether you live in a house or you live in an apartment, whether you're an owner or you're a renter. I hope we don't hear the term demographic shift ever again. Unfortunately, I think we probably will, and we need to fight that stigma. Other than that, that's all I got, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Yanez. Anyone else? Well, what more is there to say? I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved. Support.
Been moved and supported with no discussion. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. This meeting is adjourned. Safe travels, Ms. Zarowski, and thank you all for coming out tonight.
I'm going up north.